Hello, everyone. My name is Apostle Alauddin. I hope you're having a lovely day. Welcome to my channel. I am joined today by my cat right off frame right here. Uh, today, today's special live stream is to celebrate the channel hitting 10,000, now 11,000 subscribers. So thank you to every single one of you for helping me get to that number and helping extend the reach of this channel. And though I don't love talking about myself, I figured I need to do something special to celebrate this milestone. And my first thought was, let's have a live stream where I get to know the audience a bit better. But then I realized I already do that every week, pretty much. So the other alternative would be let's have a live stream where the audience can ask questions. I've done maybe one of those before or something, but I didn't really see a point at the time of doing more Q&A about myself. So anyhow, here we are. I was gonna look up when I started my channel, but I forgot to. But it's been over a year, maybe under 2 years. Not exactly sure, but regardless, I'm very happy to be here today where I am. And that's again thanks to every single one of you. So I might take a few callers perhaps if time allows for it, but first we'll take, questions from the comments. And I should have asked people to leave questions already, but that's all right. I forgot to do that. So yeah, ask your questions in the comments. And I already do have something I want to show everybody. Let me share this. It is a drawing that a follower made. And yeah, let me put that on screen. So I really appreciate it. It's in a very interesting style, and that's me with uh, one of my cats right here. It looks very similar to my actual backdrop and setup. So there's even the little yellow tagine up in the corner right there. So yeah, that's very cute. Thank you very much to the person who drew this. No names gonna be mentioned today. So let's start with this question right here that I got from Robert. Robert has appeared on this channel multiple times um, in many call-in live streams, and it's not really a question. Well, I guess it is a question about me or what I think about this. So let's start here. So Robert was asking, while researching for my presentation, I heard a lot of reformist Muslims say that they don't believe in traditional Islam because they think God is better than that. I've also heard you say, that's me, that you don't believe in religion because you think God is better than that, hypothetically. Given the common ground, do you think it would be beneficial for the ex-Muslim community to actively cultivate ties with reformist Muslims, just like you do on this channel with traditional Muslims? So that is a very good question, and noting that similarity, that's a good point. I wouldn't say I cultivate ties with traditional Muslims in particular with this channel. It's for any Muslim who wants to call in and I mean, those live streams where I have call-ins are for any Muslim and sometimes for any religious person to call in and talk. So I wouldn't make that distinction. However, I'll take the question to mean something more broad, as in, why don't we align with reformist Muslims, for example? And there's many ways to answer that. First of all, the problem stems from how Muslims end up, even though Muslims are not a monolith, and I acknowledge that, it's usually Muslims siding with Muslims against ex-Muslims, or Muslims siding with Islam, whatever that means. So when it comes to someone who's actively a critic of Islam or doesn't like it or against it in many ways, it's very unlikely that they would, in any capacity, be friendly with us. And sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But I can't I can't be honest with myself and promote the view of someone who I see them as working on a very loose foundation, because it's not just that you can or cannot get a progressive interpretation out of Islam. I think it's a stretch to get these interpretations that aren't the obvious problematic ones. But even if they do so, it's not effective enough to make a difference in the world, at least not yet. And I don't know if it ever will be. I don't think it's a good strategy to help those who are suffering because of Islam. I think it's a very, very slow burn that doesn't really do much except, for the most part, make Islam look better in the eyes of outsiders. That's from my experience so far. I mean, it's all well and good that you reinterpret a verse that, that results in you not beating your wife, for example. That's good for you and good for your wife. But is that really doing anything to stop those who believe otherwise? Not really. And I don't think that at any fundamental level we're going to reform Islam in the future to the point that people would look at a verse that says something obvious and everyone or the majority of Muslims would unanimously agree, oh yeah, this doesn't actually mean beat, it means something else. I think it's really reaching, and more power to them if they want to go on that journey to try to save their faith and the faith of others. But I only really oppose them when they get in the way and when they're posing it as if people just aren't understanding the one true meaning or the beautiful meaning of it. No, I think it's a stretch. And they can, they can do that as long as they're not getting in the way of critics of Islam, because the reality is so much more people suffer than the few reformists who are trying to make things not what they seem. And that's another point. Some people feel gaslit by this approach, that someone could come along and say, forget 1400 years of countless people suffering. Everybody got it wrong, guys. It doesn't actually mean this, it means that. It feels like low-key gaslighting. Like, who are you trying to fool here? So that's my point here, is they can do their own thing. I am not getting in their way, but I really don't like it when they pose it as if it's it's the solution all along, or that we are intentionally ignorant by ignoring that suggestion of an interpretation or solution. No, I think that if you're intellectually honest, if you let go of the reasons why you really want to retain your faith, the obvious answer isn't that this is misunderstood. The obvious answer is that this was wrong to begin with. So that's my take on that. Um, at the end of the day, I don't think it's possible on a large scale for progressive Muslims to want to align with someone who thinks Islam is better gone than progressive, in my opinion. But if it happens, it happens. Um, yeah, okay. So let's read some questions from the comments. Congratulations on 10K. Thank you, Meowzy. Meowzy. Thanks, Meowzy. And yeah, like I said, my cat's chilling back here. Apu's just sitting there. His butt was right in front of the camera, so I'm glad he's moved since. So Sultan, actually no, there's questions before that. Give me a second. VB says, Aladdin, do you think that every time a Muslim apologist win a debate, the critics of Islam are more in trouble continuing their work? No, because here's what it boils down to. People debate ideas all the time. And if someone is debating a certain idea and they lose, it's not like the end of the world where that idea is abolished because a person, a human being, debated something. And the more that I look into Islamic apologetics, the more you see that their debates, they're only won if they're unmoderated or if they're in their own spaces, if they've got some weird gotchas and flawed logic. But I'm not into the debate scene, so perhaps there are other places where they are actually winning fair and square. But at the end of the day, you need not look further than the Quran and look at the original debater making a case for himself, God, allegedly, and look at how poorly he debates or how poorly he states his case. Like, I can't remember the verses off of the top of my head, but there was one about how لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا. If this إن كان من عند غير الله, if this book was from other than Allah, they would have found many differences in it, which is such flawed logic. Like, if a book is not divine, it must have mistakes and contradictions. That's very flawed logic right there, and there's a lot more of that. So I think Islam on its own, whether its defenders are eloquent or not, is in big trouble, because now people outside of the Islamic world are starting to ask, what kind of poor argumentation is this that God has put forth for himself? So, yeah. Chip is asking, do you think Islam is losing its steam? I don't think it's an immediate thing, but I think that there's a lot more awareness about how many people within Muslim communities have questions and doubts and actually might not actually believe, but they're just going along with it. And now the more people are aware of that, the more are going to snap out of it. So I think in a sense it is losing its steam, yes. Um, Sultan is asking, how was it for you in the beginning with negative comments and threats from religious people? It was a lot more taxing in the beginning because I quickly picked up on the fact that it's not personal. Like they'll say the same things about multiple different ex-Muslims or whoever is in their way, kind of. So it's not really about me being the person that they're criticizing. Even if it's my appearance, it's whatever they can reach at, you know. Even if it's making extrapolations about my personal life, it's they're doing that anyway, regardless of who I am. It used to upset me a lot more, and sometimes it still does. That looking at the state of things and realizing I can't identify with those people as much anymore. Like, even as a Muslim back in the day, I wouldn't behave that way, and I felt out of place among so many Muslims. And it just makes me sad to see them behave that way because I know that I have more empathy for them than they would have for me. It's just a sad realization. Now it's just a more what's the word? Desensitized? Desensitized? I can never pronounce that word. I feel my feelings about it are more muted now. It's just more like, what you gonna do? That's just how it's gonna be. And threats, there has been. I've spoken about one threat that was the most credible so far. Other than that, again, it's just sad. It just makes me think I can't do anything to improve their image if this is how they're portraying themselves. The ones who do send these messages, which, let's be clear, is not a tiny, insignificant minority. It's a huge amount of people, but at the same time, it's not every Muslim that you meet. So it just makes it very confusing that you don't know someone's intentions, which I guess is the case generally, but it can go one of two ways, you know, one of two very different ways. So it used to upset me more than it does now. Ziad asks, why do you dislike philosophy? I don't dislike philosophy. Perhaps maybe in some conversations I had said, I don't know. I'm kind of what's the word? I'm guessing here, but maybe it's because I had mentioned that I'm not necessarily interested in discussing the philosophy of God's existence because I see a lot of pointless arguments among Christian apologists and Muslim apologists about proving God exists or the feasibility of God existing. And that interests me less than, okay, let's presume God exists. Why is it yours? We never get to that point. So I think it's kind of a waste of time in that context. So maybe that's what you mean. Hmm. Yeah, about the one of the previous questions. Frodo says he also noticed that reformists usually live easy lives in the West. Reformists in Muslim countries also fear their lives if they speak out loud. Correct. And as much as I feel for the reformists in their own countries who are trying to change things within the system, in a sense, I think it's a system that's stacked up against them. I don't know the solution. I'm not saying they should stop what they're doing, but I feel like it is a waste of time to put in effort to further the message of a reformist Muslim in the West, because I feel like it's mostly PR. It's not really doing much for the people who are suffering under Islam. So UV Singh says, how would you respond to Muslims who claim the only reason of the age of consent isn't 9 nowadays because kids are too soft, in a debate about Aisha's age and life being harder back then? I don't get into these stupid arguments anymore because when you take yourself out of that, when you're an outsider looking in, would you even have an argument with someone who's justifying marriage for a child? Like, how have we shifted the goalposts so much that this is a debate that we're having as if there's two sides to the story? The debate isn't about whether humans back then used to marry younger or not. It's about the perfect example of a human being doing something, such as marrying a child at the age of 6 and then consummating at the age of 9, that is going to be taken as an example that someone could reasonably, if you can use the word reason here, look at that example today and think, I don't care that the world changed. My prophet did it and he's perfect. Ergo, I can do it, right? Because he's perfect and he did that. And the criteria are met, is that she menstruated, she's ready, whatever the hell that means. So all that harm that he caused, God should have known better. If God knows the future and all that stuff, he would set a better example, regardless of all these side discussions about how young people used to marry and how harsh life conditions were. I think it's scary to hear someone give all these justifications. And unfortunately, it's not, well, I don't know if that's fortunate or not, but it's not because they truly deep down would have believed in this stuff, in like child marriage, would have thought that it's justifiable. It's because of the example that they saw, and they have to make sense of it. If the perfect man did it, what are the reasons? So Muhammad is making people worse, but you don't know how, if they're just given rationalizations or if it's going to seep into how they think about their own kids. For example, if Muhammad was able to marry someone at 9, sure, kids are softer these days, all these stupid justifications. You're still going to look at your daughter and think, she's marryable. I should cover her up. I should tell her to stop enticing men with her hair and things like that. It extends way further than this one marriage. So I try not to get into it because there's no point arguing about something like that. Some people are just, yeah. I am working on a video about the hijab, and I do touch on something similar to that topic. So hopefully that's coming up soon. Um, let's see. MKWKE21 says, do you think that it's fair that I posit all of our suffering on Muhammad? After all, Muslims treat us the way they do because of what their prophet supposedly said about us. Fair. I don't know if I'm answering from the point of view of fair because I don't know what that means. The guy's dead, so I think it's fair to attribute a lot of this harm to him. Whether he intentionally meant to engineer this religion so that in the future for millions and billions of people this is going to happen, or whether it was accidental and his mind was truly not grasping the scale of how this was going to snowball in the future, it is his fault. But I see him less as a mastermind of all situations, and he's what got us exactly here, and more as a simpler minded man who possibly actually believed in what he was saying, and the people around him also probably inserted their own agendas and ideas into his religion. I don't really care to assign him as a human being blame. It's just his image, his persona, his character, as a historical figure, as a role model, all that I think should be assassinated in that regard, as in to not be viewed anymore as a perfect role model and all that stuff. I think he should be his mannerism, his Hey everyone, I am back. That was Muhammad getting his revenge on me. Anyway, yeah, like I was saying, subhanallah, this is a miracle. His character should be assassinated because of the way that he's presented, not just as a man trying to do his best or looking out for his people, but as the perfect man, and nothing he ever did was ever wrong. There's a lot of harm that has come from that. So, anyway, now to try to catch up with the comments. Have you ever thought about Senderi is asking, have you ever thought about debunking Western woke pro-Islamic propaganda? I've come across many quite popular ignorant videos about Islamophobia and how Islam is progressive actually. I have been avoiding those videos because I'm pretty busy as is, but it is something that if I come across, I will tackle. I would love to have a conversation with those people rather than just make a video and be like, look at this stupid Westerner and what they don't know about Islam. Because in my personal life, I've come across people like that, and it came up in conversation, and I told them, wait, I actually have an insider scoop in a sense. And they say, oh, I didn't think about it that way, or I wasn't aware. So often they just need to talk about it and know more. And if all they hear is from what they presume is a oppressed minority that can do no wrong, therefore, that's going to be their point of view, all that they're fed by propaganda. So, yeah, unfortunately, they perpetuated. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and I said this. I think people blame Westerners too much for not knowing enough about what's going on in the world. They should, if their countries are meddling in these countries and whatnot, but still, the average person doesn't go about their day figuring out everything that's going on around the globe. However, so I don't blame them for their ignorance. I do blame them for ignorance when they're talking with confidence as if they have information. They need to know better. So I would like to come across someone like that and talk to them. So if you have suggestions, do drop them in the comments. So Gray Judge is saying, in Christianity, if you leave, your family will not try to kill you, but in Islam, your own family will kill you just for using your brain. It's not always down to death. It really depends on where you are, what kind of family you have, but you're more likely to continue your life normally as a Christian who has left Christianity with your Christian family than if you are Muslim. And that comes in all sorts of levels of severity and harm, unfortunately. Lee Man is saying, what do you think about believers' claim that everything in this world needs a designer and hence there must be creator God of the universe? That's something that I'm still pondering. And I like to be honest when I'm not sure about things, because I think it's silly to take a hard position if you haven't thought everything through from all angles. I haven't looked enough into the whole argument from design versus all the other arguments out there, because it still doesn't arrive at a particular designer. I'm inclined to not believe it, but again, I can't say that definitively. And I think I like to break things down, kind of compartmentalize in a sense. And that's not something that I needed to deal with urgently, and still don't need to deal with urgently, because I feel like presuming there's a designer of the universe that gets us absolutely nowhere, because it could be that it's an indication that this is all designed by a higher power to experiment with consciousness, or a higher power that doesn't care about us. Could have been designed for fun, could have been designed for a purpose we don't understand, or for us to just enjoy living, or so many reasons. So the inference that it was a designer and therefore the purpose is that the designer wants praise doesn't quite follow, and it's never been proven. So that's the part that I've focused on. And in my personal life, this is out of just personal curiosity. I am looking into this, but I still haven't gotten a definitive conclusion yet. Mojo, I did show that drawing in the beginning. Yeah. Let's see. Bilal says, hi, even though you're an atheist, what do you think is the best argument for the existence of God? Again, I don't have a good answer for that, because that really depends on what you define God as. But the closest one was what the previous commenter asked, is that everything looks too complex to have happened through years of randomness and entropy and all that stuff. I'm not saying that that is a convincing argument for God, but it is large enough that it gets you wondering how much you know and how much you don't know, about the topic, but not about God, but just a higher like a higher power that we haven't understood. That's as far as I could see it being plausible. But everything else hasn't really resonated with me. Let's see. I'm very behind on comments because there's so many of them and questions. So thank you, everyone. I'm just going down the list. MYR, thank you for the super chat. Says, congrats. It's also in Mulid and Nabawi today. Any thoughts on today is the Prophet's birthday, apparently. Any thoughts as an ex-Muslim on it? So my first thought as a Muslim is I was told that we celebrate it, but not too much because then it may start becoming like idolizing the guy as if he's Jesus or something, which is ironic because we say alayhi salatu wasalam more than we say most things in Islam, or sallallahu alayhi wasallam and all that. So Muslims already idolize him, but I don't think you're supposed to celebrate that day as a holiday per se, as like one of the main holidays, but many Muslims do. Anyway, um, no real solid opinion. They love Muhammad, so they're going to celebrate his birthday, which is, as far as I understand, not confirmed to be this day. And number two, any post 11,000 members plan. Keep up the great work. Thank you. I don't have any milestones or plans for numbers in terms of growth. I have no idea how the channel is going to do. It could be one video that, catapults me to 15,000 tomorrow. It could be another year to get to 20,000 or another 2 years. I don't quite care as much as I care about the quality of the work that's being done in the meantime and the quality of the audience that I'm receiving, the kind of clicks that I'm receiving. I don't want it to just be angry clicks or those who are like, yeah, not actually listening to what I'm saying, but they're just supporting because they're angry at another group. So yeah, I don't have any solid plans except that I will continue to have 1 to 2 live streams a week and a video every now and then. And yeah, like I said in one of my posts, I am trying to make the video shorter for you guys, but sometimes the topic is just so large that you can't shorten it down to less than 20 minutes. And UV's asking, what's the main aims and goals for your channel? Aims and goals, different things. So goals, like I said, I don't have set goals for numbers or anything, but my goal is to explore all the ideas that I have about Islam and leaving Islam, and to bring on as many people as possible to share their point of view on it, especially ex-Muslims, but also I do talk to believers all the time. I don't have a goal for numbers, but that is part of my answer for the aim, I guess. I want to have addressed most of the controversial topics in Islam at some point. I want people to be able to relate to my answers because many of them out there are. And I want someone who has my point of view to be able to find me online and think, I'm not alone. This is not a novel thought that I've had. And I mean that as a good thing when he discovered that it's not a novel thought, because if you do think that you're alone in the world and thinking something so blasphemous or unreasonable from an Islamic point of view, you might feel like hell about it. So I hope that it continues to bring comfort to people, and I hope that I approach topics from angles that haven't been explored before. So yeah. The Noon is saying, awesome to see you interview Adam al-Masri. Do you have plans for engaging with more Arab ex-Muslims / critics? Someone like Hamid Abdul Samad is brilliant. Yes, in a couple of days, I'm talking to Adam al-Masri, who is an ex-Christian who criticizes Islam and Christianity as well. He has a large platform in the Arabic-speaking world, and now he's transitioning to the English-speaking world as well. Do I have plans? Nothing solid, no plans to talk to any of the Arab ex-Muslims per se, because I haven't really had much to talk about. Like, I don't have that much to input, and a lot of their experience is very similar to mine. It might be fun to chat with some of them. I've heard about Hamid Abdul Samad, and I'm sure there's a lot I could learn from him. Just haven't come around to scheduling things like that. I'm very much an amateur, even though I now have 11,000 followers, which by some accounts is very little, by some accounts is a lot. So I'm figuring it out as I go, but hopefully in the future. And I did have a chat with a an atheist YouTuber. I'm not gonna say the name because I'm pretty sure he's gonna publicize it at some point, but that's gonna be a surprise. Very beloved, at least by me. I used to watch his videos a couple of years ago. We'll see when that video comes out. Okay, so back to the questions. Is there a book? So questions about books. Is there a book you're reading at the moment? Some book recommendations, and also, what is your favorite book you read so far? I can't answer the question, what's your favorite book you read so far, because I don't even remember all the books that I've read so far. I retain 10% of the information that I learn from books or documentaries or informative YouTube videos. It's more for entertainment and then whatever my brain holds on to. When I try to sit down and read a book intently, I have to take notes, which I do. And then I have a summary in my little library, and I look through those books every now and then to remember what it is that I read. So I have the list somewhere. Is there anything that I wouldn't call it my favorite book, but I was enjoying the what was that series called? The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There's multiple books in that series. It's sci-fi, and I like how random the author's mind is, and it just helps me kind of disconnect from everything, and it's like watching a Netflix series. There's nothing too deep about it. There's nothing that's going to teach you a life lesson, I think, but it's just really fun to read. I wouldn't call it my favorite book or my favorite series, but it was a fun read. So I would recommend you read that if you're into that kind of thing. And yeah, that's it for now. So, Aladdin, what happened to the Salman Rushdie anti-theism video? That's a good question. It's in my drafts and I never got to it, and I don't know if I will right now because there are more pressing topics that I have to get to. And that's the problem with my methodology, if you can call it that, when making videos. I write down thoughts on not on a piece of paper, but digitally usually, and I think, okay, I'm going to write this into a script, and then I don't feel like it because now I'm thinking about something else. And it just keeps happening that way. And I try to get to whatever is most urgent or whatever I have most inspiration to write. And at the moment, I've put that video about anti-theism on the shelf for a bit till I get to the other videos first. And basically summarized what I think is, I think that being an anti-theist comes off an as if you're cruel or an adversary to theists, or that you're the enemy or something. But when you think about it, a lot of theists, and I'm not gonna go through every religion, but at least the major ones, a lot of them are very anti-atheists or anti-non-theists. Atheist again makes it seem like that's an opposition of a position. It's a neutral one. The theism is the claim, and the atheist is saying, I don't believe you. And a religion like Islam, for example, by nature is very adversarial against those who don't believe, especially those who don't believe in any God or those who believe in a couple or more. So I think it's only natural to take the position that these ideas are harmful. The idea that something unseen, something unprovable, something transmitted by, word of mouth from this guy who said he saw this guy who went to a cave and all that kind of stuff is going to dictate your life and people's lives around you and the lives of the humans that you bring to life, the kids that you birth. That is very, very dangerous. I was discussing this with someone also the other day. If a believer thinks that the afterlife is way more important than this life, that's a completely different outlook on life. It could be good, if they have a relative who died, it might help them cope with that pain. If they think, I'm going to see that relative in the afterlife, that's all well and good. But it could also mean that they're ready to make certain sacrifices or live a certain way or force people to live a certain way because they think the afterlife is going to outweigh all that. Or it might make them less likely to act on something to stop certain harm because they think God's going to take care of it or God's going to reward them in the afterlife. It's a completely different outlook on life. And it almost makes it seem like we're not speaking the same language. If I care about making things as best as possible in the next however many years I'm going to live and then I'm going to die, that's because there's no after that, at least not that we can tell. There's nothing else to come. This is what's important right now. They don't place the same importance on life. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that all theists don't care about death or something, but it's a very different way of thinking about things. And I think it's dangerous to live life and dictate things for others based on unprovable, sometimes downright crazy ideas. And again, that's not to call theists crazy. And being anti-theist is not anti-believer. It's anti these ideas. But when you think about it, God telling someone to murder his kid to prove that he loves him is a crazy idea. But when you look at it in Islam, oh yeah, that happens because God wanted proof. That plants a seed of insanity. It plants a precedent that God can ask you for anything and you have to obey. That's the moral lesson here, whether you believe that the story is literal or not. But it's a crazy story. And people do similar things today and they're deemed crazy and they kill their children because they want to prove to God that they love him. So I think religion and theism, in a sense, legalizes and normalizes a lot of what otherwise would have been seen as delusional and harmful. So, yeah, that's why I'm anti theist. That's a summary of that video, I guess. Um, Sarah says, I think the creator argument is from a human perspective. People make things that we see, so therefore there must be an entity that made what we see. Maybe the universe doesn't work like Earth. I agree with that. Yeah, we're extrapolating from how we think. In a similar vein, when especially Islamic apologetics, they like to give these examples of what if you disrespect your father or your teacher or something of the sort? Doesn't he have the right to discipline you, or shouldn't he be owed some level of thank or praise or respect? You're thinking about it from the point of view of a human and an authority figure that's also human who exists. It's a very flawed example, and it's only because we're extrapolating from how we see other more powerful males usually in our lives, and that's how they look at God. So, yeah. Thanks for the super chat, Nazon. They say, I often find that the least religious or knowledgeable member of my Muslim family get the angriest when I question Islamic teachings. Why do you think that is? And have you also experienced this? Yes, I absolutely have experienced this in my personal life and otherwise. I think that, what do I think about this? Several things. I felt that discomfort when I would be cornered. And I don't necessarily mean by a hostile person who's trying to make me look bad, but when I'm cornered by a line of questioning or a line of thought into questioning why I believe this thing, or I see opposing evidence and I think, no, I'm right, but why? And it's a very uncomfortable position to be in. And if you haven't thought things through very deeply, if you don't know the facts, you feel like you're being attacked by a lot of new things all at once. And perhaps it's the kind of person who is too scared to think deeply about these topics. This is not me diminishing their intelligence or curiosity. Perhaps they have, because of some randomness, because of a random thought, that fear was ingrained in them earlier, or perhaps the seed of belief was planted earlier and it bypassed their critical thinking filters earlier, and now they're just at a point where it's very difficult to face these thoughts. I think the more you know, the more you have made peace with that discomfort in a sense, the more that you at least have heard this before. You've heard this contention with this point, and you felt that little bit of panic or discomfort, and now you know how to dismiss it better. Like an Islamic apologist, they don't panic when they're cornered in that sense intellectually. They're like, okay, I know what to say to get out of that, or I've thought of that before. I have an answer that makes sense to me, and so on and so forth. Um, and yeah, I think that their unfamiliarity with the situation is why. And well, Hassan Adwan says, one second, there's someone spamming in the comments. That always happens. Hassan Adwan says, I call this the gay bashing syndrome, namely those who deep down have doubts. They don't want to admit they go on the attack. That is one other aspect of it. And I think that sometimes they calm down and they think about it. Sometimes they don't. But I I don't know. It's always good to say I don't know, because at the end of the day, I'm not a psychologist. I'm just, I'm speculating based on my experiences. Part of it is also some of them don't want to feel inferior to you or unintelligent or ignorant. So they take the defensive. That's a human ego response. They take the defensive and they take the attack, actually, because the best defense is an attack, I believe, or at least in many situations it is. So they don't want to feel bad about their position. I don't know. Sheikh says, have you heard of the in Libya? I have read that name. I think it's a man who's sentenced to death. Again, if I'm being honest with you, sometimes I don't keep track of these stories because I feel like if I do, then I have to be talking about it. And if I can't right now, or if I can't bear to at the moment, I haven't looked into it. But I understand that I have a responsibility as someone who has a platform to talk about these issues and advocate for them. Sometimes I just feel like it's almost hopeless from my point of view, that every time I look into a story like this and I see that there's no resolution, there's no justice, and I feel like I'm just shouting into the void. It makes me almost not want to look at it unless I'm ready for it emotionally. But after the live stream, I will have to do that. Okay, UV says, what impact do you think having a room filled with plants has had on you mentally? Seems to be quite comforting. I think it is. I have a lot of plants here and in another room. And ironically, though, when they start dying or wilting, no matter what I do, it is the opposite of comforting. But still, for the most part, it is very comforting. I highly recommend it. I try to get cheap plants as often as I could, and yeah, it's a good idea. Sean B says, "Do you believe Jesus, Moses, Noah, Abraham, etc., were actual historical persons or mythical characters?" I don't have the historical background to tell you if they were actual people or not. There could have been a real person that the story was based off of. I mean, I've heard that there's a reason to believe that Jesus was an actual human being with that name. Sorry. But I don't know enough to tell you whether that's true or not. But I think that the myths around them are definitely not true, and those are what matter. It doesn't quite matter whether they actually existed or not. Of course, it's still a curiosity for historians to figure out, but I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't quite matter, to me at least. Arden Warwick says, what if the universe is simply an accidental byproduct of some greater entity's experiments? What if we're just a spillage that hasn't been cleaned up yet? I've thought about that before. It's like, how wasn't penicillin invented accidentally, or discovered, not invented, accidentally by a biologist or a scientist who, kind of saw it in their culture that their bacteria culture was dying or something of the sort. It could be that we're a moldy growth on the side of some plant. I don't know. We could be a byproduct of some grander process, or a byproduct of an experiment. there's no way to tell really. So that's why the conversation about is there a higher power or are we designed or something gets me nowhere because it still doesn't tell us why. Hmm. General Butt says, "Are you vaccinated?" Yes, I am. Oh, I answered this question in the beginning, but in short, I think it's kind of a lost cause, but I'm not going to get in the way of people who try to do that as long as they don't get in the way of, people like myself, or as long as they don't claim that we just couldn't see it clearly the whole time. Because when you think about it, it's such a incompetent God who, after all these years, the people who figured out what God actually meant are those who borrowed ideas from progressive values and from human rights and from all the things that people have figured out after a lot of trial and error. And then they say, well, that's what God actually meant all along. It just makes God look like an idiot. Hmm. Mzar says, I recently chatted with a Muslim convert who's already got a large YouTube following. That's all you need to do, honestly, is just say, hey, I'm not a Muslim, now I am, and people will just flock to you, especially if you are one of the races that Muslims or non-white people sometimes tend to look up to in a weird complex I'm not going to get into right now, but that tends to happen. Turns out she doesn't actually believe any of the uglier aspects. What irks me is that she publicly promotes Islam to the world without ever clarifying to that her version of Islam is not shared by 99% of Muslims worldwide. Of course, her videos got picked up by Dawah channels too. I am thoroughly entertained when I see that infighting, when I see Muslims, and that's good because when I see Muslims pointing out, actually, that's not Islamic. Actually, this is not real, or you're leaving out this part. I want that intellectual honesty. I want the Dawah channels to call them out on this stuff. But unfortunately, to the outside world, it's just promotion for Islam. Look at this person who seems very nice and friendly and more like us. If the person is a Westerner and a Westerner sees her, they're like, oh, this is someone who's not too far from me physically or mentally, at least like from a cultural point of view, and they embraced Islam. It must not be so bad after all. So it's unfortunate. And this is sad news. I didn't know that. A man killed his wife for celebrating the Prophet's birthday yesterday. Because, like I said, you're not supposed to celebrate the Prophet's birthday because that might be seen as shirk. But since when has Islam been about agreement? Islam Channel USA says you need to get yourself wearing your hat on as a logo. Oh, your hat on your hat as a logo on your hat. Yeah, so me wearing a hat to put a logo up here and then draw an icon with me wearing the hat with the logo. When does it end? It's infinite regress, and that's why God exists. What convinced you God is not real? It's the other way around. Nothing has convinced me that God, as presented by religions, is real. The God that wants stuff from you, the God that's jealous, that's angry, that's all that kind of stuff. Nothing has proven it so far. And Abu Bakr says, do you plan on collaborating more with smaller creators, secular spirit? Yeah, we just haven't had the time to work together again, but we talk all the time. And yeah, it's collaborating with other people is hard because you got to find something that, you can add to each other, like complement each other with, and fill in each other's gaps kind of thing, and also have the time to align everything. I'm just very disorganized right now to schedule with other people. I think that, for example, Philosophy Tube's videos about Islamophobia is worthless word salad that doesn't even define the term. And there's also Step Back History and Demystifying Islam. So I will look into that. The other day I keep watching just random YouTube videos, and they're talking about a very different topic to Islam. And then suddenly they'll drop something like, of course, we all know the obvious that homophobia is bad and Islamophobia is bad, for example, and they continue on. I'm like, hold up, why did you have to like say something so ignorant? Because when you say Islamophobia is bad in the same sentence as homophobia is bad, you don't seem to understand one of these ideas. Like, do you not understand that disliking a religion that is anti-gay is reasonable? So that makes you Islamophobic, but not homophobic. Like, which one is it? You know, unfortunately, when people don't know what they're talking about, they end up giving a huge audience a lot of propaganda without meaning to. VB says, do you think that belief in the day of judgment can hold back progress and reformation? I think so, and I've touched on that earlier. It's, for example, the idea that we have to keep the world going for generations to come and we have to take care of the earth and so on. I'm sure there's a sentiment in Islam that can bring you to, leave the world a better place than you found it, all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, the world is temporary and heaven is forever. And it's not whether we pollute the earth that's going to bring the day of judgment sooner or not. So the day of judgment is going to happen when it happens, when God intended it to happen. So what we do till then doesn't matter as much when it comes to the environment. For example, that's one way to think about it. So I think that putting so much infinite importance on the afterlife would make you neglect things in this life, and not in a good way at all. Hmm. I'm trying to catch up with comments, and I'm guessing I'm seeing that some of them are 20 minutes ago. Damn. Okay, I'm trying to catch up right here. Hmm. Okay, so I've mentioned this before. Roxy Baby says, if Muslims were really convinced of Islam, they would have to take it more serious and stop interpreting their religion in a nice way. They'd be too scared of Allah and hell to do so. I've said something similar before. I was struggling as a believer to think of day-to-day life. People have this blind spot where they can go about their day-to-day life and not think about religion sometimes. Like, there are a lot of Muslims who they think about religion but not too deeply. Like, they'll follow all the rules and they'll go about their day and pray 5 times a day, but they're not actually thinking about that they truly believe that a lot of people that they interact with are going to hell, eternal hell, the graphic imagery of that they have a huge chance of going to hell because of the majority of human beings are going to hell. It doesn't just, suffice to be a Muslim. They don't truly sit down and grasp all of this. They have this blind spot and they go about their day, which is good. Otherwise, it would be a crippling way to live. But those who do end up trying to follow Islam to the letter because you want to minimize the risk of going to hell. You want to be as accurate as possible. You don't want room to tell God, well, I think you didn't actually mean beat Allah. I don't think you understand Arabic very well, and so on. It just seems like you're risking it. So I was struggling because if I was going to be intellectually honest with myself, I would have to be a very, very strict Muslim. I would have no wiggle room for all this reinterpretation. I would, it would be not only a miserable and confusing life, but I would be doing it against my will because none of this made sense to me. But what made sense is that if you don't do this, you go to hell and so on. So when I see a conservative Muslim or someone who's more traditional or literal about the interpretation, I don't feel ill feelings towards them. I feel like I feel sorry that you're in this position, but I get it. I would be too. If I believed in Islam, I would see no other choice. So, yeah. Hmm. That touches on something I said before about the afterlife. If you put so much importance on the afterlife and on God intervening, then you have this idea that even if God doesn't intervene and save the people, or even if God doesn't do something about this injustice, God is going to repay them in the afterlife. He's going to make everything even. But that's not how it works. If someone is, wronged and they die a wrongful death, that's it. That's the end of their life. You can't just hope that God is going to make up for all these starving children by giving them bigger houses in heaven. That's not how it works, unfortunately. And I don't even know if that's a good way of doing justice because, yeah, anyway. Alpha Uno says, in the end of times, the sun will rise from the west. What does that mean? So I thought about the physical implications of that. I think Muhammad was under the idea that the sun, it moves around and the earth is stationary and the sun goes behind God's throne, maybe metaphysically, not actually literally, whatever, but that it sets somewhere, perhaps in a muddy spring, as the verses say. And I know people contend that a lot, but if you read the verses, as I mentioned in my Prophet Muhammad Proves Islam animated video, the verses use the same wording as Abu Dhul Qarnayn found people and he found the sun setting in a spring. So, according to Islam, the sun sets in a spring. But that's an aside. For the sun to rise, to change directions like that in the real world, right? The earth would have to stop rotating and rotate the other way around, right? For the sun to appear like it's rising from the other direction, or that it would have to flip over 180 degrees, something like that. Whatever it is going to be a huge shift in momentum. And can you imagine being in a car and then someone pushing on the brakes suddenly and then hitting reverse? That's what it would feel like. But for the entire Earth, everything's just going to fly to one side if we stop immediately. Everything's going to be destroyed. There's not going to be a day of judgment. There's not going to be anything nobody to witness, the sun rising and all that stuff. But if it's done gradually, if we see like a slowing down in the Earth's rotation, that's going to mess up a lot of things before we get to the point of witnessing the sun. I'm not exactly sure of what it was, but I know that it would probably mess with the tides. It would probably mess with the weather system. It would mess with so many things. So it's going to look like the day of judgment has already arrived before we even get to the point of shifting directions. And there's no indication that something like that would happen unless we're hit by another planet or some body that shifts the direction of rotation, which is very unlikely and probably more destructive than the shift in direction itself. Anyway, that's a long-winded way to say that very unlikely, if not impossible. Or like impossible and disastrous looking. So the fact that the author thought it would be something so smooth as the sun comes from the other side, perhaps God is powerful enough to make magic happen and like break all the rules of physics. But now we're just talking about hypotheticals. Stop scamming, man. Thanks for the super chat. I see you often in the comments, and it's very generous of you. I appreciate it. Message to Apostate Kadadine. I was thinking maybe Aladdin could focus on presenting videos while you focus on the writing, editing, directing, strategizing, inviting guests, and thinking. That's very nice of you to think that this little lazy snooze ball can do anything except be a lazy snooze ball. No, he's not doing anything. Let's see if we can zoom in. Nope, that's the wrong one. Hello, lazy snooze ball. Okay, let's zoom out a little bit. Anyhow, back to it. Yeah, that would be nice. That would be really nice if he can get some of that load off my shoulder. Okay, back to the comments. The other comments, I mean. So, end of the line says, what can you say about Muslims that see Quran mistakes and scientific errors and just close their eyes on this? Do you know, they forget about it and continue believing? What can I say? I get it, but not really. Because I get it up to a point where I used to do that and think, no, the person bringing up this point must be wrong. I'm just going to focus on other stuff because there's so many other reasons to believe. When in reality, eventually I had to question myself, do I believe because of the verse about the splitting, the ocean where the waters don't meet and all that stuff? Do I really believe because of that? Or was I sent? I remember a lot of this stuff that we see today as Quranic, numerical, scientific miracles, all that stuff, I used to receive as emails, as like forwarded email chains. That's how it began before WhatsApp. And I remember seeing this stuff back then and thinking, oh, wow, this is nice confirmation. That's very cool. And going about my day. I never thought, hold up, I didn't pray, but now I will, because this makes so much sense. I can't even I can't not believe. It was never part of why I believed. So every time someone shut it down, eventually, when I didn't get into debates or anything, but if I come across something that shut down one of these talking points, I would think, well, there's 1,000 more. Like that's not why I believed anyway. So why would it be why I don't believe? And I think that's the best part of this answer right here, if I do say so myself. They have to think, how much is this factoring into my belief to begin with? And if it's not factoring in much to my belief, then that's why it's not factoring in much to my disbelief. So when I speak to a believer and they say, I believe because of the Quranic miracles and whatnot, I ask them, how much of your belief, like if you believe 100% that Allah exists and Islam is true, how much of that is built on the Quranic miracles or scientific miracles, whatever example or another? And say they give it a 20%. 20% because of this, 20% because of that, the rest 60% because of something else. You ask them, so if this is disproven, if it's shown that this is hocus pocus, not real, are you going to be 20% less believing? If the answer is no, then is it really part of why you believe to begin with? That's what I think about it. And I will continue reading the live chat. Thanks, Lightseeker, for the super chat. Non-Muslim friends have shunned stop talking to me after I point out how destructive Islam is. It is frustrating. Your thoughts? Well, first of all, I'm sorry to hear that. My thoughts are that they don't seem like it's not that they're bad people. I don't know them. But perhaps they're not the kind of people that you want around you anyway, because change the topic, make it something else that you disagree on. You would want them to not immediately jump to the side of whatever popularity or the side of something that seems to be obviously true, which is Islam is great and don't ever say anything about Islam. They would want to hear you out first. They would consider your point of view. So if they were ready to shun you over something like that, perhaps it's not the right crowd to be around. Or maybe they're just really under the control of these, PR campaigns about how beautiful Islam is. It is extremely frustrating. And I'm sorry that you might have to lose your friends that way, but just remember that it's probably about more than that. It's about how they think. And I hope you find people, I hope they either change their minds about how they approach such a topic with you, or that you are surrounded by people who are more like-minded in the sense that they can hear you out and disagree and then continue. Because I think Islam is harmful. I have a lot of friends who don't think Islam is harmful, and we get along just fine as long as they're not promoting Islamic ideas, as long as we're not like arguing about this stuff. We just go about our lives. So yeah, and thank you, thank you, thank you, Zishan Ayub for the super chat. Says, I think most Muslims just believe because they think that the concept of God makes most sense in Islam, but usually their understanding stops there. Yeah, and I've asked that question before. Why? Okay, let's presume God exists. Why Islam? A lot of them automatically say, well, it makes more sense than the other religions. But it only makes sense more than the other religions because they were always taught that it makes more sense than the other religions. So the prime example is, how can God be the Son? And, how can there be a Holy Trinity? That doesn't make sense. I'm with you. It seems nonsensical to me as an outsider and as someone who was raised Muslim. But to someone in that faith, it makes perfect sense because that's what they learned, and in their mind it clicks for some reason. Or how could there be more than one God? Well, the only reason you think there can't be more than one God is because of all the examples given in Islam about how can there be two captains of one ship, or can there be two leaders of the people, and all these flawed human examples. It's not that the other religions are nonsensical. It's by default, these other religions are nonsensical to a believer of their own religion. So, yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't go further than that. Okay, let's continue. Hey, he says hello, by the way, and thank you everyone for 11,000 so far. Say hi. He doesn't talk. He is not a very talkative one. The other one is. Please don't step on the keyboard. Next one. Oh yeah, thank you. Hey there, Nordic says, I love your channel. Thank you. Your content. And I'm looking forward to the day I'll participate in the live stream and talk to you, ex Muslim guy here. I'm looking forward to that as well. So many people have told me that I used to watch you and I never thought I would call in. And then one day randomly I did, or one day I made sure that I'm home alone and I did, or one day I finally felt like today's the day. And I'm always happy to hear that. Mariam Salam says, what indoctrinated ideas that you still hold have you examined, and were you able to change your mind about those ideas after examining your thoughts on it? For example, pork or drinking or dogs. Hmm. So I have a discomfort with dogs because of some experiences growing up of dogs being, a bit aggressive, and growing up in an area where there are fewer pet dogs than there were like stray dogs, and stray dogs sometimes were rabid and we're like scared of them. So not very comfortable with dogs, but that's not for religious reasons. Part of it was, though, the feeling that they're gross. I still think that dogs are a little bit sometimes gross, and I don't necessarily like when they lick me. Cats, though, by contrast, their licks are just dry. So yeah, I prefer cats. And I'll get back to that. But Hassan Adwan is saying I still feel guilty when I eat pork. I don't anymore. So that's one thing that my indoctrination has kind of faded away with. So I don't like eating pork when it tastes porky, if that makes sense. Bacon tastes good, but if it's like pork chops or something else, I think it's an acquired taste, and I never acquired it when I was younger, so not really my thing. But I don't think it is for the reasons that Muslims think it is. That it is, it's dirty and whatnot. It's just the same as chicken and beef and all that, like the same industries. There are things to be improved in all of these industries, so that's not my reasoning there. I did have a lot to unpack about my views on gender and women, and it's always an ongoing thing. So I can't really put a finger on it, or tell you exactly what it is. But the way women dress, for example, again, I can't put it all into words, but I used to be a lot more offended almost personally by how women dress, or thinking like more on the side of, well, she shouldn't be dressing that way if she doesn't want to be harassed that way. And then I examined that a lot over the years. So there's a lot of residual stuff there. So when someone leaves Islam or leaves a group that thinks a certain way, don't think that now you're better than everyone and that you are, you fixed up your mentality. No, there's still a lot of work to be done there, and self-reflection is good at all stages, whether you were ever a believer or not. So yeah, there's a lot that I've worked on. Time Space says, "Can I come on, please?" I'll see at the end of the stream if there's some time for that, but as long as there's questions in the comments, I will continue to take them. Alexander says, "I know it takes effort, but consider using your Arabic to deep dive into books not translated to English, stuff like offensive jihad and so on, expose those things." So the reason why I haven't ventured into that is, aside from time and energy, it's there's a lot more that I think is more effective that people need at the moment than to hear about all the horrible hidden things, because it's still important, and I hope that someone comes along and does it, or maybe I will in the future. It's important work anyway. But most people, like if you tell a Muslim, look at what I found in your book in a language that you don't even understand, very deep inside, most of them are not even going to believe your translation. They're not going to look into it. They're not going to think about it. Some of them might, and they might double down, or they might think, okay, this is weird. But for the most part, that's not what ex-Muslims, for example, are looking for. If someone's watching my channel and they're thinking about leaving the religion, or they have left it and they're confused, sometimes it's not very comforting to keep finding out that Islam is so horrible. Even in all these Arabic sources, there's this uncovered stuff. They want to hear other stuff. They want to hear about the obvious that's not being talked about. Like the stories that we know and retell every day, I think there are many angles that have not been uh, examined there. Like, I think in my animation videos, for example, I try to show different sides of the same story without pulling out anything that's um, hidden. But again, it's not a critique of that approach of deep diving and finding things that people haven't before. I'm glad that others are doing that because I cannot at the moment, and I'm trying to focus on a different approach. But who knows in the future? Yes, yes, he would have. Have you recently thought about taking off the mask? I have, but I don't think I will be taking off the mask. Hmm. Mojo says, please use my drawings maybe on your shirt, maybe on cups or such. You could sell them. Um, well, yeah, merch. I don't know if I'm ever gonna have merch. It's I have conflicting feelings about that, and feel free to weigh in here. So, being a full-time YouTuber, which is new to me, is not profitable, and I knew that going in. The reason why I went full-time is not because I wanted to make money or to make more money than my job. I don't think that even in 3 years, I'd make as much money as I did at my job. The reason I quit is because one of the reasons is I needed more time and energy to do this. It's so hard to do this after work, especially given the heavy nature of these topics. It just feels so disingenuous for me to hear something extremely heavy and then go to work and then continue and then do it again in the evening. It's just very, very difficult. So anyway, point is, so far I've been doing okay thanks to everyone who has been donating and like, following my Patreon and PayPal and all that stuff. I'm really appreciative, and whatever YouTube sends my way as well. Um, Merch is probably going to be more complicated, but also I don't want it to seem like I am trying to sell this cult of personality. Like, I don't want it to be about the Aladdin channel or me, if that makes sense. And it's not necessarily how everyone's going to view it. I know that people would still want to support me and buy the merch and whatnot, but there's also the idea that it might be unsafe for people to wear such a thing or have such a thing. So even though there are many who are willing to get it, there are many who can't, and that's going to affect the way that they're distributed, and it might get some people in danger, which I don't want to do. And I don't want to make it about me, but at the same time, I know that maybe there might be a point in the future where I could make something that's more about like slogans or things that are more important to the message that I'm giving rather than just, this is a shirt of Aladdin. Because I wouldn't want that. But anyway, all that aside, I appreciate the drawing that you made. Dizzy Izzy says Tupac or Biggie. um, I'm really not like a huge fan of either of them, but when the songs come up on Spotify, I'm like, hell yeah, this is hype. So I think Biggie Biggie's music is a bit more hype. Maybe, I don't know. Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. I've watched neither. Crucify me, but I haven't, and I don't think I will. Bilal says, do you have a favorite band? What kind of music do you listen to? I listen to all sorts of music, but not really a favorite band. It's very hard for me to pick a favorite of anything: food, bands, books, anything. But lately, on my way to the gym the other day, I was listening to "Killing in the Name of" by what's their name? One second, I gotta look this up. Oh, Rage Against the Machine. I do like Rage Against the Machine. So my memory is so poor I can't even tell you the names of these bands. Um, what do you think about the hadith? Mojo says, are some hadiths doing a great disservice to the historical Muhammad? Yes, I think that the hadiths are not spoken about as often as they should be, and they're kind of in this limbo where Muslims can easily point at them and be like, "Well, it's not Quran, so I can dismiss whatever I want," and they don't realize that that approach is not methodical, and it ends up dismissing most of Islam. I think there's a lot there that is the same grading as things that Muslims would accept, that shows them that by the same accounts, by the same sources, he was not a great man, but it'll take time. Aladdin, how many crosses will be broken and how many pigs killed when so-called Isa turns up on Judgment Day? I don't know. Why do Leon says, why do Muslim countries practice Sharia differently? That's because people interpret things differently at the end of the day. Um, and Islam is not that clear, as people might want you to believe that Islam is a clear religion and the Quran is a clear book. When you're trying to extrapolate laws from situations that happened so long ago with so much confusion about what actually happened, with someone who's making up laws on the spot, who's using laws from other religions, from verses that aren't definitive, from verses that are describing things incorrectly, you're going to have differences in opinion. And that applies to Islam in general, not just the laws and the countries that practice it. So about something that I said earlier, Erica says, when I was a Muslim, I was actually struggling to care about anything else except not going to hell. And you're right, it's crippling. It doesn't make sense to me that most people aren't thinking deeply about hell and heaven and all that stuff. And they seem to think that heaven balances out hell. It doesn't. Even if for me, the reward, the chances of reward is much more likely than the chances of hell, if I'm born a Muslim, which is still not necessarily accurate from a statistical point of view. But say the chances of me going to heaven was way higher than the chances of me going to hell because I was born Muslim. I'm still thinking about everyone else who's going to be suffering forever. And people don't seem to think about that, and it doesn't cripple them. And I wonder if all the ones who are actually thinking deeply end up leaving, or they end up, I don't know, doubling down. Thanks for the super chat, Lightseeker, yet again. The Muslim world is utterly silent on the mistreatment of the Uyghur. Your thoughts, by the way, Rage Against the Machine members are all commies, no joke. No thoughts about communism, but interesting. I didn't know that. Again, this is why I don't have favorite bands or anything, because I don't really know them enough to be a favorite. They're silent about the Uyghur. I think about, like many other social causes, it's just about, a lot of it is about the outrage and about the feeling like you're being oppressed by extension. Like the group that's being harmed right now, if they're people of color, if they're something that I can relate to, I will feel offended or hurt as part of that group, even if I'm not there with them. I think that plays a role in it. And same goes with other political conflicts. There's so much, and that's not to dismiss this as a political conflict, but I mean other atrocities against human rights. So often it happens to Muslims and others, and Muslims don't seem to care about it because it wasn't thrust into the limelight the same way that this one was. So it just becomes about symbols and virtue signaling more than actually caring about the people. So I think that was a fad that kind of faded, unfortunately. And yeah. Anyway, back to the other live chats. SH says, are you going to make a video around hijab and Mahsa Amini? Yes, it's not going to be about her specifically, but about the hijab. I am working on that. Herman says, Muslims often criticize the West for colonization, both concrete and cultural, but why not more often point out that Arabs brought Islam through colonization and conquest and eradicated local culture? Yeah, it's the pot calling the kettle black. This is going to be a bit of a lukewarm, maybe hot take. I think people criticize Caucasian Westerners and their ancestry way more than they do other backgrounds. That's partly because many of these countries in the West have achieved certain level of quality of life, and it's not perfect, but it seems to be better than other parts of the world. And part of it is because they built it on the backs of others more recently throughout history. So it's easier to focus on the more recent things that happen in history and forget about everything that's older than that. So to say that, for example, the US has built its fortune on exploiting the people of that land and the people in other lands in the future is accurate to some extent. But to say that to ignore that the Muslim slave trade, for example, was way worse than the American slavery is misguided. I think that people don't pay much attention to that. And I've had a lot of black ex-Muslims call in and talk about that, and they say, I am baffled by how my people don't realize that we were subjugated by the Muslims, that we lost our culture, we lost our identity, and we've just become Muslims in the same clothing. We were enslaved at some point early on, or some of us might have been. Yeah, people don't focus on what happened further back in history, and now we're demonizing us, the newer group of oppressors, or historically the newer group of oppressors. So, yeah. Marco says, I've noticed some of the Dawa men have colorful histories. Example, Ali Dawa used to be a rap artist and womanizer. I find that very hard to believe. That, I mean, maybe wannabe womanizer, but I find that very hard to believe. Do you think that they became radical for the purpose of redemption? I don't know his backstory, so I'm not actually making any definitive statements about that. I've seen it where in the Arab speaking world, there are a few prominent speakers. I can't remember their name, but there was one Khaliji guy. He would have a Ramadan show every year. I think the show was called Khawatir. I don't remember his name, but it was a nice show, and it was Islamically themed, where he would go to other countries too sometimes, and like Japan, and see things that they do and say, look, Islam actually preach that we do this, but they're doing it, we're not. It's I don't like that they're making it seem as if Islam called all of this stuff out already, but it is a good message to send that, look, at examples of non-Muslims doing it, why can't we do it too? Like, it wasn't a hostile show in any way. Anyway, the presenter, I recall vaguely that he mentioned how when he was younger, he might have drank or done other things that are sinful that way. And I think part of it is the guilt eating them up, or for some of them, they really want to do a lot to save other people who are in their position. Maybe it's empathy, I want to save people from ending up possibly like me. But I don't think empathy is a motivator behind Ali Dawa's methods. I'm always shocked by how deeply non-practicing Muslims in my life who rarely talk about Islam believe in it, and how shocked they are when I tell them I left. Have you had the same experience? Absolutely. And I'm more shocked when sometimes they try to ask, why? Like, tell me why. Like, I don't understand. Why don't you believe? And I'm like, let's not get into it. And if we do get into it, they seem to be flabbergasted. They seem to have never thought of these things before. And if they have, they're just regurgitating whatever they saw on a TikTok the other day. Like they're just like, oh yeah, that's because of this reason. And for a fact they haven't had that original thought before. I think it's just such a given in their lives that Islam is true, that it's shocking to them, and they haven't thought it through. So yeah, I've been there. And they get really silent sometimes when they realize how out of their depth they are. But that is self-awareness. If they do that, that is good. If they reflect on the questions and their thoughts. But if they don't, then I hope they do someday. So I haven't heard of this. A boy from Dagestan who was born with Quranic symbols on his body, or Kenyan boy born with a tiny copy of Quran. We've seen that happen time and time and time again. All sorts of cultures and religions all over the world, something on an animal or on a human, and it ends up being man-made every single time, or some kind of pattern that people really misinterpreted as some kind of miracle or text. Every single time it's proven that way. If we keep assessing every single one of those, if we keep looking at Christian boy in Kenya does this or has this on his body, you're going to realize it's all the same kind of crap everywhere. And we need to stop giving credence to this sort of stuff, because if God's only reliable method of telling us where he is a book in a language that most people don't speak, and then sprinkle some verses on an infant, and then hope that the entire world believes that because there's some writings on an infant that the parents probably did, it means that God is real. What an insane, asinine way of proving yourself. that it doesn't make any sense. Does it make sense to you that, and I know this is not you posing this as this is a miracle that proves Islam, but I'm just saying generally, does it make sense to you that the infinitely wise, infinitely powerful creator of the universe is going to play this cat and mouse game, or throw some crumbs around and be like, "Ha! If you're smart, you would realize that the clouds in the sky doing the shape of Allah means that Allah is real." What kind of stupid stuff is that? So anyway, um, Little Miss Sunshine says, "Have you seen the Master of None episode where Little Dev accidentally eats bacon because he didn't know it was pork?" I don't remember all the episodes on that show, but that's the one with what's his name? The guy from a Desi background, the guy from Parks and Rec. I don't remember his name, but yeah, I've watched the show. I watched it when I didn't know what ex-Muslim meant at the time, so I was very confused by his position. I was confused by my own, but it was interesting. Favorite films. I've said this before many times. Forrest Gump, Mean Girls, top 2 right there. There's probably other stuff that I forgot. Yeah. What's next? Hmm. I'm really glad that you're dissecting how Islam has affected you, how you view women, because many ex-Muslim men don't bother. Yeah, and I preach that you're not done just because you now don't believe in a god or the god. So always keep thinking about what you believe, not just about religion. Hassan Adwan is asking, how widespread do you think the support for the well-known conservative Dawah boys goes in the real world among ordinary Muslims? So that's tricky because I don't mingle deep inside their circles anymore, at least not where I live, to figure out how they relate to that particular Dawah person or that other Dawah person. But I think that on some level, it is representative of a big following. Like if someone can go as far as having 600,000 followers or 1 million followers and not have any real resistance, that means that a lot of the people that are watching him are the people around us. Statistically, a lot of them are the people around us. And I've seen instances where people in I'm not going to give too much away, but I've seen instances where I have confirmation that yes, these conservative Dawa people are um, people are fans of them. People around me in real life are fans of them. So it's not uncommon. And I feel like if I had a platform and I had 500,000 followers and I said some very abhorrent things, and no ex-Muslim in the world seemed to be opposing it to any large extent, or it didn't seem to be some kind of widespread opposition to that, you would think that that's an indication that a lot of ex-Muslims are rallying behind my point, and that's not good. No, I have not. Zishan Ayub says, sell masks as merch. I would, but then they'd just be black masks, but people can buy black masks anywhere. And I'm not going to sell you a mask with like Aladdin on it or something, because then you're identifying yourself. So, interesting. I didn't know that. So there's a troll. I don't really care. But yeah, there's someone who's been making videos about me, but this is interesting. He's been sending people from his little gang to donate to you with stolen money. That doesn't make sense to me because, like, as far as I know, there's no way to get money back from me if you've donated it with stolen money. That's for the credit cards or banks to figure out. So thanks for money laundering on my behalf. I don't understand the point of that. How do you deal with friends and family members who assume you're still a believer? That's complicated. So I am the people I'm surrounded by, as in friends, I get to choose, thankfully, more than a lot of other people. So I'm not surrounded by people I have to pretend around. If I see you often enough, if I feel comfortable enough with you to tell you my secrets or count on you and stuff, you would know that I'm not a believer. Like, you don't necessarily have to know everything about my life, but you would know that I don't believe anymore. I don't have to pretend in front of you. I don't have to, pretend that I'm fasting or something, that kind of stuff. But family members, I feel like when I don't like to act, I don't like to live a double life anymore. So whenever it is not too troublesome for me to just say, yeah, I'm not going along with this. Like, this is this is what I believe, and I'm not going to go along with pretending. I do that whenever I can. But of course, we all want to avoid so-called trouble or friction that we're not responsible for. So one can never be 100% themselves, unfortunately, not yet. Herman asks, will the unrest in Iran lead to changes, or will it lead to even stricter laws and more oppression? I'm not qualified to answer that. I really don't know. I've had a couple of Iranians call in to the channel and tell us how they feel, and one of them, I'm gonna publish that segment of a video at some point soon. And yeah, I really don't have anything to say about that. What do you do for fun? Man, it's been a while. um, I've been trying to make it a point, especially when I control my own schedule, to hang out with friends at least 3 or 4 times a week, at the very least. And what I do there really, really varies. I've been bowling recently, very fun. Um, Sports, exercise, and I've been learning a lot about video editing and other stuff that I can't get into because that's too identifying. But yeah, I've been busy with some stuff that's very vague. Have you ever met a Muslim who believes that global warming or human overpopulation is a problem? Most seem to be obsessed with making babies, the men anyway. Um, no, I have not. And wait, give me a second. It is getting, I'm getting uncomfortable in this hoodie. Okay, we're back. I haven't, and I wonder if it also has to do with the background that they're from. So if you meet someone from, I don't know how to label it, let's say a developing country, global warming and climate change is less of an immediate concern to them, at least less of a thing that people in their country or in their culture have the luxury of talking about. They're usually focused on other stuff first, because that's usually countries, even though they might be suffering from global warming and climate change more than the countries who talk about this stuff more often, the countries that have the luxury of addressing this are the more wealthy countries. So maybe that's one reason why I haven't heard a lot about it from Muslims that I've met. But like I've mentioned earlier on the stream, ultimately it doesn't matter in that worldview beyond taking care of the people that currently exist and maybe the next generation or something. Uh, but the afterlife matters infinitely more. So it's not as big of a deal. This is not the end of the world. And God's day of judgment is not going to come sooner just because the world is more polluted or warmer. So it's almost like a moot point. But that's not to say that Muslims at large don't care about sustainability or global warming and all that stuff. I'm sure many of them do, but it's less of a concern. I mean, let's be honest, if your outlook on life includes the fact in your mind that you might end up being roasted eternally in hell, I don't think I would care about a couple of degrees of heat in this life. And if it means that I will die sooner or something, or I'm suffering, that's, in a sense, that's good, because that's more hasanat, that's more good points that might get me to heaven. So you see how there's a lot of ways to ignore that kind of stuff. Um, Max 10 says, I admire your integrity. Merch can get cultist, but the image of a faceless hat, headphone, and mask is very impactful. Keep on marching. Thank you. Uh, I have an idea for merch that's not really the channel at all, but it's something I said in one of the videos, but I'm not going to say it so that nobody capitalizes on the idea. But yeah, maybe an anonymous thing could be nice. Um, Hmm. Tanky asks a good question. Do the peaceful reformist apologist Muslims actually preach their revisionist Islam to extremists or only to non Muslims who criticize Islam? Mostly the latter. And I've seen them try in the Arab world to go on talk shows or something and tell people how, like, there are countries where people have started arguing about how come you can beat your wife Islamically, and women come out to defend this because Islam says so. But there are people who try to go on TV and have an argument and say, no, no, it's not, because Allah also says so and so. And usually they get shut down by a lot of people. And if they go to extremists and try to preach this, they're going to be shut down and maybe even like called the kafir and maybe even harmed. So usually they focus on beautifying the image of Islam or preaching to those who are kind of on the fence or those who aren't very religious. But it's very unlikely that they would change the minds of those who, I wouldn't even call them extremists, the very strict adherents of Islam. They don't try. Someone plans to dox me. They all do. It might happen eventually, it might not. There's no point in worrying about it. Thanks, Secular Spirit, saying congrats again on 10K. Thank you. You're so late, it's 11K now, but I'll allow it. Um, Naruto or One Piece? I've watched neither. I don't watch anime. That's one thing. I used to when I was a kid, and I used to think those were called cartoons because they were dubbed and they were played on TV. But apparently, I used to watch anime as a kid. Um, let's see. The ahadith that were added to Muhammad. So basically, the question is, are there ahadith that taint his image, or he didn't actually do these things, but they do a disservice to him? Maybe, maybe not. But since we don't really have a solid method of determining what he actually said and didn't say, we have to go by whatever Muslims believe he said and didn't say. So, hmm. Okay, I am now trying to catch up with the comments again 20 minutes ago or something. No, I didn't mean to highlight that, but okay. Um, Fadi says, "What do you actually believe in now, lifestyle or discipline?" That's a very that's a very vague question. I find it very difficult to answer. So I would ask you to be more pointed, because usually when someone asks this, and I don't think Fadi is trying to do this, but often I was asked this by someone who's trying to get me to say liberalism is my way of life, and that doesn't even make sense to me. What does that entail, that liberalism is my way of life? So they're looking usually for a one word answer or some kind of all encompassing philosophy on life or something. I can't summarize it to that. I don't have a guidebook that I go by. So if it's more pointed about certain topics or the way I think about certain things, then I can maybe answer that. Um, Again, I don't know if any of this is true, but yeah, stuff about Ali Dawah. Okay, this is not going to turn into Ali Dawah slander stream, but yeah, to state my opinion about him plainly, I think he's very uncharismatic. He is the stuff that he says is horrible. He has little to no redeeming qualities as a person, at least his persona online. I don't know about him in person, but the way that he carries himself online, there's very little to none that I could praise him for. Um, yeah, I just think all around he's a horrible person, the way that he presents himself online. And I hope that he gets what's coming to him in terms of losing the platform that he doesn't deserve, or being viewed for being judged for his words. That's what I mean by get what's coming to him. Nothing violent, but more like the stuff that he preaches. I hope that people see through it. And the guy who says he'd be proud of executing people, I think, is kind of a stain on humanity. That's as far as I can say. Um, hmm. Unfortunately, true. UV says, I find it ironic how some Muslims assume ex-Muslims leave due to lack of knowledge on Islam, when it's usually the opposite. They leave because they knew too much on disgusting views and laws. That's part of why a lot of ex-Muslims leave. Some, to them, the concept never made sense to begin with. Sometimes it's bigger picture things, and sometimes it's realizing, oh, wait, my religion allows dismemberment not only for theft, which is, by the way, let's talk about that for a second. So, one defense of how you're supposed to Islamically chop off the hand of someone who steals. One defense is that no, well, you got to really prove it, and it's very hard to prove, and it's a deterrent penalty. It's not supposed to actually be done very often. They're all very weak defenses, but let's say, for the sake of the argument, that someone did steal, caught red-handed, no pun intended, and they're they're not excused for it. They have to be punished because they got caught red-handed. They have to be made an example of. So someone who stole for whatever reason because they couldn't get by in life or they wanted more in life or something, I'm not justifying them stealing. Now they have one less hand to work with, literally, especially in the old times where most of the work would be done manually. So you are basically, you have a disability now thanks to a mistake that you made or a bad decision that you made. And now you're in a worse position and you're going to be more likely to turn to stealing again or become impoverished or, I don't know, worse things. So, what does it do for rehabilitation or even punishment that would allow you to then become a better person? It just causes more harm. So, anyway, going back to the question, like for me, for example, I knew about that hand chopping thing when I was younger and it was scary. But it wasn't just because it was bloody and gory and horrible, therefore I don't believe in Islam. It's very short-sighted, it's barbaric, and it's very indicative of a primitive society. Like you see these things and you see them in older cultures and you think, yeah, it's just an evolution of that or devolving of that or another version of that. So what makes it so special? That makes it seem like it's not the divine message that came down for all places and times. It seemed like they were making it up as they went, or they were borrowing from other religions and mentalities. So, yeah, but point is, a lot of ex-Muslims know way more than the Muslims in their lives. I can attest to that myself, even before I ever thought about having a YouTube channel. Um, Thank you, Asad. I appreciate the message. Hmm. Okay, I can't comment on that. Sorry, everyone. I have to scroll up back so far. Rashid says, if you've been indoctrinated about the end times coming sometime soon, I doubt you're going to care much about the overpopulation or global warming. They're just signs of the end of times coming. I've seen that so many times. It's infuriating. So when a Muslim acknowledges that, yeah, the weather systems are changing and it's getting worse and all that stuff is actually happening, yay, science, acknowledging science, but it's a sign of the day of judgment. No, 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 you went in the completely wrong direction. Like they're almost like happy about it. They're almost thinking, or maybe scared and thinking, yeah, the day is coming. We're right. This is confirmation. The horrible things are confirmation. Who are we to mess with it? Like we can try to stop pollution and overpopulation and all that stuff, but it's going to happen anyway. It's a sign of the day of judgment. It's hard to escape that mentality. Are you a plant lover? Kryptonite Flame says. Yes, though I don't take as meticulous care of them as I would like to, but I do like plants. Okay, so Ali asks a good question. Do you get pissed when right-wing religious conservatives shit on Islam and Muslims? I do most of the times. It's very weird. Yes, because they still don't quite see it from where I'm coming from. So it's hard to define what right-wing religious conservative means, but whatever picture you paint in your head, say for the sake of the example, which is not characteristic of all of them, but say you see someone in a Trump hat, right? and I don't like Trump. That's obvious. Say you see someone in a Trump hat and they have very bizarre position on politics and science and all that stuff. I don't hate them. I wouldn't call them names. I won't even share memes and be like, "Oh, stupid Trumpist, blah blah blah." I still think, okay, if your idea is bad, I oppose you and your idea. Like if you're really causing harm, then I oppose you personally. But for the most part, I want to understand why you think that way. Hopefully your mind can be changed about that, or hopefully you'll change your own mind if you actually heard me out rather than just demonizing them. So when someone from a non-Muslim, non-ex-Muslim camp is just there to be like, yeah, Islam is the cancer of the world and Muslims are blah blah blah. I'm like, you don't get what I'm trying to do here. You're just here to shit on someone or another. Like you're not really helping us here. And I make that very known and very clear. Um, and sometimes they oppose me and they're like, how dare you blaspheme against Jesus, or how dare you do this? I'm like, you still don't get the point of what I'm doing here. This isn't to help you win one over on Islam or Muslims. um, I'm not taking sides here. Like I'm not taking your side against the Muslims. I don't like to get involved in these um, unproductive, not just arguments but just hostility. So yeah, it does tick me off. um, So about the doxer, I think you should take him seriously, though. He used to be a victim of his doxing. He's notorious for doxing hundreds of ex-Muslim from Discord. Interesting. He also found the older brother of an ex-Muslim, and he got him beat the ex-Muslim while recording it. I don't even know what to say about this. It pisses me off that this shit happens all the time, not just to, YouTubers and whatever. It happens to everyday people all the time. The harm that Muslims cause to ex-Muslim way, way outnumbers all the harm that so-called Islamophobia has caused against Muslims outside of their countries. Like all the attacks against hijabis, all the attacks against someone with a beard, all that stuff pales in comparison to the shit that Muslims do to their own. Like be it someone who left Islam or not, to other Muslims as well. And nobody talks about that. We're all focused on these unfortunate incidents of attacking a stranger because they're Muslim, and nobody cares that that person might be beating their own kid Islamically because they left, or because they don't want to wear the hijab, or because they don't want to pray Islamically allowed. It pisses me off that people don't realize that it's an open air cult. It really is a cult. You see cult members walking all around you. Not all of them are as deeply into it as others. That's not what I'm saying. But Islam, as many other religions are, is a cult. And we allow so many things to fly under the radar, like the normalcy of Muslims beating up other Muslims or ex-Muslims because they're the wrong ones. Um, Maybe eventually I will get doxxed anyway, and maybe I will face some kind of consequence. But just remember, if that happens, to not stop doing this, okay? Because we're not going to stop till people see it for what it is. And if that means that eventually Muslims will be demonized, whose fault is that? If Muslims aren't doing anything about this, I've seen it. I've witnessed it in my own life. I've witnessed it happening to other people. Nobody does anything about domestic violence or doxing or all this kind of stuff, and it's eating away at my ability to relate to those people, because I relate to many Muslims, but I relate to them less and less when they don't seem to care about what their fellow Muslims do, when they seem to approve of it, when they seem to turn a blind eye. I just think we're not the same, and maybe we'll never be the same. But till something happens about that, I'm just sad for everyone who has been harmed. And if that guy wants to come after me, I don't know what to do. Like I'm already, wearing a mask. I'm doing my best. So have at it, weird doxer. I hope that you get hit by a bus someday for all the harm that you have caused. And I'm sorry, this has just got me really worked up. I hate that everywhere I go, you can wear a t-shirt that says, I'm a Muslim, ask me anything about my religion, and you'll probably be fine. Like maybe sometimes you'll get someone nowadays who will push back and say, "Hey, how come your religion says this ugly thing or that ugly thing?" At most, you're not going to be sucker punched in the back of the head. You're not going to be beaten up. You're not going to be like that doesn't happen. But I dare you to wear an ex-Muslim shirt, like if that even exists, and just walk through a Muslim country and be like, "Talk to me about atheism or talk to me about not being a Muslim." It's not going to happen. Not even in the West. They attack you for that kind of thing. I hate that this double standard is just allowed to go on, that ex Muslims don't even feel safe anywhere in the world. I mean, in some places they might, but for the most part, unless you just shut up, put your head down, and play along in some situations, you might get in trouble just for not conforming. It makes it very hard to be an adult, you know? It makes it very hard to be an adult in these conversations because it's so easy to want to lash out and be like, well, F you too. And well, you all suck. And Islam is a cancer and you're a cancer and all that stuff. It's so easy to just throw that back at them because not only do Muslims demonstrate that they don't give a shit about ex-Muslims for the most part, not only that, but fundamentally Islam is demonizing people like us. Like I think good Muslims are good despite in spite of Islam, not because of Islam. I think that if a Muslim is friendly towards someone else, that's opposing to what their religion at the core teaches. But that's good. That's good. But how do I know which is which? Like, how do I know which Muslim would be happy about someone being doxxed and beaten up, and which one would just say, "Oh, well, that's too bad, but what you gonna do?" Or which one would say, "Yeah, that sucks, but can't do anything about it." It's very tricky. And apparently that doxer is sending me stolen money. Well, I don't know if they ever take that back, but whatever. I don't care. Camilla is asking, is it true that non-Muslim women are allowed to not wear a hijab in Islamic society? That's what Believers Hub says, but I don't know if it's true or not. So Believers Hub, that's such a toxic person on TikTok. We've gotten to many spats like a year or longer ago. Anyway, she just talks out of her butt about everything. It really depends on what Islamic society is. But if you're living in a strict area, like as you can see in Iran right now, she can't just say Iran is not Islamic. Like you can't just every time you see an example of something that people oppose, you say, well, that's not Islamic. Iran is an Islamic nation. Whether you agree with Shia Islam or not, whether you agree with their interpretation or not, they started from Islam. Like that's their motivation behind forcing a woman to wear a veil. So what she's claiming is bullshit. Like it really depends on the society. Sure, you can go to Lebanon and not wear a hijab, for example, but there are many pockets of areas in countries. Like you want to go to Iran, for example. You want to go to Saudi Arabia and not wear a hijab. Now things might have changed, but women had to like cover their hair at least when they're going out, if not necessarily wear a hijab perfectly. So she's always trying to make it seem less than it is, but the same person, Believers Hub, would tell you that wearing a hijab is mandatory. I remember she came after me because I said, I'm not sure if Muslims think wearing a hijab is mandatory or not. She was like, and you call yourself an ex-Muslim? Of course it's mandatory. Okay, but I thought that some Muslims disagreed about it being mandatory or not. But she would tell you that it's mandatory and then tell you, but if you're not Muslim, it's up to you though. But if you are Muslim, you're going to go to hell and burn and like your skin's going to fall off because it's mandatory. What kind of insanity is that? I'm offended that we're supposed to engage with those people as if we're speaking the same language. But what are you going to do? Interesting question. Tanky says, if you could magically make one or more current Muslim into ex-Muslim, who would you pick? Just ignore the ethics for this hypothetical question. Like a popular one? If I wanted to cause a lot of damage, I think there must be bigger names than that, but I think Yasser Qadi would be a very good example, very good candidate, because he spoke about his like crisis of faith and crisis of knowledge and whatever, and the standard narrative has holes. It seemed like he was very close to realizing that, hey, maybe this is all actually not true. but I don't know why. I don't know if he actually believes himself or what he's spewing, but it would be very interesting if he switched to being open about not believing, if that's truly what he doesn't believe. I don't know. But for shits and giggles, one of the more controversial, angry Dawah men. That would be very interesting. And then people like imagine if Ali Dawah left Islam. People will point at him and say, "Well, you see how he was very ill mannered. He was a horrible example of a Muslim. That's because he was an ex-Muslim all along." Yeah, you just can't win. Yeah, similar to how Muslims see lots of things as a sign of the Day of Judgment. Um, American fundamentalist Christians talk about the state of the world as doomsday is near. Something I want to note about that. So, say you are, and I've seen this before, uh, say you're walking down the street or getting on a bus or public transportation, whatever, and you see a guy with a sign that says, "The end is near, repent now, turn to whatever," and all that stuff. You'd think, wow, what a crazy guy. I just want to get to work. What the hell are you on about? But when someone does it in a book and people have been doing it for thousands of years, you think, you know what? That's what they believe. Like maybe they have a point. No, it's still the same insanity. It's just put in a phrase differently and given a lot of precedent and like authority by the scripture that it's in and by generations of people saying, yeah, it's true. Don't think about it. But every time you hear this stuff, you hear the day of judgment is near. Just know that they've been saying the same exact thing since day one. Just know that think of the crazy guy with the, and I'm sorry, like not diminishing the person with mental illness who's out, with a sign that says the end is near. I empathize with how they actually believe that this is happening. But think of that person when you see this stuff being posed as legitimate. Think about the crazies and think about how, again, not reductively calling him crazy, but think about how insane that seems. Insane seems to be the word here that fits. Um, yeah, I those comments also upset me. Ex-Muslim channels are always full of Christians trying to convert them. It must be annoying as hell. It used to be annoying to me, and it might be annoying to some people. But these days, it's more amusing to me because not just amusing in a sense that I want to make fun of that, but more like, okay, let's go. Tell me more. And I end up asking the similar questions and getting similar answers to what I get in Islam. And I would say, well, don't you see how this is the same exact thing? So, yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Kryptonite Flame says, congrats on 10K. I love your content. Thank you very much. I still haven't, I still haven't let it sink in that it's 10,000, 11,000 now. So thank you, everyone. Yeah. Reaching 10K subs is a definite sign of the end of times. If I ever reach 20 or 50, or I don't think that's ever going to happen, but 100, that's going to be a sign of the end of times, at least in my life. It's going to be like, oh, this is really happening, isn't it? Yeah. I'm devastated that as a man, no one has advised me to wear a hijab to hide my beauty. Yeah, I thought I would do it myself because I'm being modest. I'm wearing a mask and a haircut because a cap because I don't think I don't think you guys can handle my beauty and my immodest beauty. So this is a sneak peek of what I'm going to talk about in the next video. Am I showing you my hair right now? No. Am I showing you my eyes or are they just there? Like, is this me showing? Would you say Aladdin was on stream the other day showing his eyes? Showing his eyes. Really? Am I showing my neck or is it just there? So when a woman's not wearing a hijab, is she showing her hair or is it just there? Just like we were born with hair, men were born with hair, women were born with hair. She's not showing her hair, it just exists. So yeah, when someone says a woman who's not wearing a hijab is showing her hair, no, she's just not hiding it. That's the difference. That would be interesting to see. Um, that is also very interesting when you see that in fighting, people have accused the Yasir Qadi of being a kafir. Okay, so this is something that makes me very interested in Australia. It's hilarious to watch street preachers, Ben says, at work in Australia. They very quickly get told to shut up by people around them. It seems like Australia has this no nonsense stance against not just Islam, but religion and these kind of preachers. And threats. I know for a fact that threats that have been made against Australian ex-Muslim YouTubers are taken seriously. People have gotten in trouble, but good luck doing that in other parts of the world. No one's gonna do much about it unless you have like super concrete evidence and the person's address and everything. Um, you know, law enforcement is not going to get involved. But good on you, Australia, and especially the Australian people. I've seen that they in social media they shut down the apologists. They're like, just shut up, man. You're not going to fool us. So yeah, maybe we need more people who are just upfront and rude like Australians. Yeah, try to imagine Muhammad Hijab as a vocal ex-Muslim. I wouldn't want anything to do with that. It's like a bull in a china shop, except that expression is apparently not accurate because Mythbusters have shown that a bull in a china shop will try to not knock anything over. So we've been saying that all wrong. But yeah, that would be a wild scene. That would be a wild, wild scene. I don't know if I would hope for that to happen, but yeah. I would say he's a fake ex-Muslim who was planted there to try to make us look bad. Yeah. When I say I was a Christian in a comment, there's sometimes this form of Christian saying I was never a Christian, like they ever knew me. Yeah, it's funny when people keep pointing out that the other person is probably fake. So I've struggled with that before. I've had callers who call in and say, I'm a Muslim, but so and so, or I'm an ex Muslim and so, or I'm a convert to Christianity. And sometimes I didn't believe them. Like I straight up wanted to be like, you're bullshitting. You're absolutely bullshitting. Because if you were at some point a Muslim, you would say this differently or that differently. But I hear them out because there were times when I thought that and I turned out to be wrong. Like, for example, when people spell Quran as Koran, I used to think that's only when non Muslims spell it, they spell it that way. Like, it's always with a Q. But then I saw an ex Muslim spell it that way, and they explained that this is how, um, I don't recall the specifics, but phonetically how it's pronounced or written, something like that. And I was wrong about that. Or I had a caller that I thought was fake, and then turns out, no, they actually were a real ex Muslim, and their story was very impactful and true. So I would never jump the gun and make that assertion, especially if someone's voluntarily calling me to talk about their beliefs or lack thereof. However, sometimes it's been very obvious, and I get to a point where I'm like, look, like I don't trust that. Like there was a guy who called to say that he used to be a Muslim or grew up a Muslim. I'm not going to tell you which stream, so you don't go find him. But then he became Christian, and his story was so full of holes. It was so full of it, and I kept questioning him again and again. I'm like, so when this event happened, this happened, and his story kept changing a little bit. And one of the indicators, which again is not foolproof, was how he was saying Islam. And I sometimes am guilty of switching pronunciations because of I'm switching between English and Arabic in my head. So sometimes I might say Islam rather than Islam or something. So it's not always true. And some actual Muslims who grew up outside of the Middle East or Asia would say Islam. But he just rubbed me the wrong way and it was all fake. Anyway, that was a tangent. um, Growtopia says, Growtopia is boring, says, I want to move to Australia, but I'm scared of the spiders. Me and you both, sister or brother. Thanks, Yuvi, for the super chat again. The one thing that started me questioning Islam, never Muslim but had Muslim friends, was the double standards for hijab. What's the difference between man's hair and a woman's hair? Absolutely. Thing is, though, I grew up within it, and it wasn't even a question to me. Like, I need to stop saying the word like. I used to be more anal about not saying like, and then I got influenced by people around me. So, like, bear with me. When I grew up, it seemed like a given to me that women would cover their hair. That's just what women do. It didn't strike me as odd that we're just two sides of the same coin. How come women cover their hair, men don't? And when you shift the goalposts like that, when you go to a place where nobody covers their hair, nobody gets aroused because they saw a woman with hair. Maybe if a woman has hair that's on point and like she's taken good care of it, or naturally it's just very, very pretty, and one out of many women, sticks out that much, then you might notice and be like, she has very nice hair. But I don't think people go around getting boners because they saw a woman's hair. That's not a thing. But when you control something, like everyone's hair is covered, you see a woman with hair, that's almost the first feminine look that you see that's not one of your family members that you're not sexually attracted to. But if you see a woman in a hijab, it almost takes the femininity away from it, because you don't see the whole person. You don't see her hair. That's it. It doesn't have to be this way, but one of the things that define women, at least traditionally, is that they have longer hair than men. Like, at a glance, if you see someone with long hair, it's probably a woman, not a man. I'm not saying that has to be that way, but that's traditionally how it's been. So when you're scanning the horizon and you see long hair, as someone who's not used to seeing long hair, it's exciting. It's like, oh, woman, what? I'm not supposed to look. Oh, but I saw it. Is this supposed to turn me on? And all that stuff goes on in your head. It ruins the way that a person thinks of a woman. But if you move to a place where everyone has their hair down, you don't feel aroused because someone has their hair down. And if you do, you deal with it. You don't cover up women's hair in case you get aroused. Cover up women's hands by that logic. And some people do, actually, because hands can be attractive, or arms can be attractive, or whatever. Then cover up everything just in case I get aroused. And eyes, too. Eyes can be very pretty. Cover those up. So, yeah. Hmm. Okay, this comment is saying, nope, not that. Merely says, would you be up to debate any Muslim YouTubers? If so, which ones? Again, believe it or not, I don't keep up with Muslim YouTubers because every time I watch something of theirs, I feel so compelled to say something, or I just can't watch and not respond. Not as an egotistical thing, but if I'm that's since before I had my channel, I would watch some of these apologists and think, no, 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 someone has to tell you that this is absolutely wrong, or you missed this point, or you missed that, and it makes me feel compelled to say something. And now that I have a platform, I can do something about it and make a video or whatever. But then I'll never get done with all of these, might be even regarded as like picking fights with people, when that's not what I'm trying to do. But I just simply don't have the time of day for it. But when it comes to debates, is there something worth debating? Like, what is it that I am taking a position on that we could debate? Like, for example, if they want to debate a certain verse being harmful or not, I guess we could. But at the end of the day, because of the difficulty in getting statistics for the harm that Islam causes in Muslim countries and other places, it's very hard to point at something and say, look, even the statistics prove this. And they will always cower behind that and say, well, you can't prove that Muslims harm ex-Muslims, so show me how many ex-Muslims were executed. All that stupid asinine logic. But I think that in debate isn't always productive, especially that kind of religious debate. And some things shouldn't be given the privilege of being debated. Some things are not up to debate. And when you make them up to debate, you're almost making it seem like you both could be wrong about this, which there are some things that are just not up to debate like that, like whether the Prophet's marriage to a child was harmful. If we are going to start debating this, who's right or wrong, that we're acknowledging that there's a big chance that they could be right about their position, which there isn't. So, yeah. Yeah, if only I could show you my huge deposits from all the videos that get demonetized for, sensitive topics and whatnot. But sometimes the donors are, you wouldn't believe who's advertising on my channel. Sometimes I don't get to pick anything. So sometimes there are religious ads on my channel, which I find very interesting. Yeah, everything's a conspiracy. I'm a fake Arab. My countries, Grotopia says, my countries are in denial about me being ex-Muslim. They always bring up whataboutism and saying, deep down Islam is real. You hate it because our family, not because you hate Islam. So I just saw this comment elsewhere. And again, Muslims always say this stuff. And this is why I think Islam would be destroyed in formal debates. Like if you get the representatives of Islam being Allah and his messenger, they would be annihilated in any formal debate. Because at the core of it, Islam relies on this idea that a kafir is a believing disbeliever. So you're a denier. You actually believe in Islam, but you hate it, or you hate Allah, or you hate Muhammad, and that's why you don't believe, or you say you don't believe. So at the core of it, Islam is about calling you a liar. If your whole stance is that everyone who disagrees with me is a denying, dishonest liar, you automatically lose, because that's not a valid argument to have. And unfortunately, they actually deeply believe this. These questions remind me of how disconnected we are as a people. Like you deeply disconnect from Muslims when you leave Islam sometimes, because you look at how they think about these everyday things and you just think, I don't, we're not talking the same language anymore. You genuinely believe that everyone who doesn't believe in your religion is either misled by their own religion or they're in denial. Like you couldn't pause and think about how could all those people be lying to me, conspiring against me? Isn't that crazy talk? They don't think that way sometimes, and it makes me feel like I can't relate to them. Um, yeah, I don't know what to say. It's difficult. I mean, it'll be like me saying all Muslims don't believe in Islam deep down, but they're pretending because they all want something, because they're all lying. That would be so wrong. That would be incorrect, not just insensitive or a bad position to take. That would be very incorrect. So it baffles me that even the most reasonable, the most devout of Muslims, not that those two things are mutually exclusive or related, the most reasonable, the most devout of Muslims still cannot get past this idea that kafirs have to exist, a denying, nonsensical believer who wants to go to hell. So I don't know how they get around that hurdle, but most of them don't. Hmm. What books do you have on the shelf? Give me a moment to pick one out. Let's see. So I haven't started. Okay. I'm trying to pull an interesting one, but many of them I haven't started yet. Okay, this is not what you're expecting me to pull out, but here we go. This is going to be a surprise. So this book right here, there's a story behind this. So I used to read a lot when I was younger, especially around bedtime, like lights off, but I'm still reading. And I had this book when I was very young. This is not the same one, but recently I found it and I ordered it, and it's in perfect condition. So I'm very happy about that. And I used to read Quran first to memorize what I need to memorize, and then when I'm done, I want to read some fairy tales and stuff. And I thought about these things very differently. Like I thought this was all obviously fairy tales, right? This is all just stories that people told to teach a lesson or whatever, or fun to read or something like that. And I know that these are way watered down from their original stories that are a lot more grim, I believe. But the flying animals, all the magical stuff, it's the same sort of stuff that we were taught in Islam, just for different reasons. And I did ask that question when I was young. I remember asking, how come there's no miracles anymore? How come everything stopped with the prophet? Because it would be mighty convenient if there was a prophet who would split the moon today and split the ocean and do all that kind of stuff. Lots of splitting for some reason. Split people, that they have done. Very good at splitting people. And I was told that they all died with the prophet, and it's a mighty convenient, like all the miracles ended with the prophet. That's it. And it's a mighty convenient excuse, but I did believe it when I was young, or more like, well, adults said that, so it must be true. Anyway, that book I got recently. Well, not that recently, but I ordered, and I've been making my way through it sometimes when I just don't want to think too hard. And yeah, so that's not the the reading recommendation that you were looking for. Um, Deep Daddy says Arsenal to win today. Yeah, I'm an Arab guy who doesn't watch soccer. Crucify me. I used to play soccer, but I don't anymore. So, Tanky. I don't want to get into this right now, so I'll touch on that in the hijab video. Okay, so about that. Herman says, do you have any thoughts about how many Muslims demonize pre-Islamic Arab history, all to make Islam look good in comparison? I haven't studied pre-Islamic history, Arabian history, to tell you definitively that, but I was under the impression that Islam was right, that Islam came to an era of darkness and it fixed up everything, and people were burying their kids alive and whatnot, which I remember coming across a poem from pre-Islamic times where someone was basically insinuating that good for you, him who has a daughter, because that means that you're going to get paid, like she's going to get paid a dowry or something, usually cattle maybe or something like that. So then your wealth is going to increase if, you incorporate it into the family wealth or your own. So it seems to me like it would make more sense to keep a daughter and marry her off even at a young age, like Muhammad took her at 6. So just bear 6 years and then you can have a payday compared to burying a daughter. So anyway, these narratives that they spin about pre-Islamic Arabia, I think at the very least they're exaggerated, but I ignore all that noise because presume they're right. Presume it was a dark era and they needed some kind of morality and all that stuff. Now what? We've moved way past that. Way, way past that. Like I've given this example before. The first car, I believe, was created by Daimler Benz. It was some of the Germans created the first cars, but the first mass-produced cars to be accessible to everyone was the Model T, the Ford Model T, I believe. Regardless, both of those cars, very slow, very inefficient, very unreliable compared to what we have today. Good, yeah, cars, they existed at some point and they helped, it was a very good help at the beginning. But now what? You're not going to drive around in a Model T unless you're doing it for fun. So why are we still relying on prehistoric ideas of morality? Well, prehistoric, of very old ideas of morality and how people should behave and think, rooted in fiction, when we have progressed further beyond that. Say Islam did help people at the time. Say Islam was the light and darkness. Now it is the darkness and light compared to like how it's holding back people. So it's almost futile to argue about that. Islam gave women rights back then. Okay, cool. It gave them more rights than being subhuman. Now let's bring it up higher than whatever Islam gives them. Like, you want credit for something that happened 1400 years ago? We're way past that. And that's one thing that holds the Islamic world back, unfortunately, reminiscing over the past. Even the so-called golden Islamic age or whatever else, it's always looking in the past. Look at the Quran predicting this amazing scientific thing, or look at the first scientist who invented whatever was Muslim, which doesn't say anything about Islam. Okay, yay, clap, clap, clap. Now what? Where are we going to go from there? What's the next move? So it's a waste of time to argue about that. Grotopia, I'm really sorry to hear that. She's saying I was forced into hijab at 9, now 18. And I don't think the progressive Muslims saying it's a choice does anything to help someone like that. Do you ever receive any DMs from any Dawah boys? Are any of them pleasant to you in secret? No, there was one progressive Muslim. I wouldn't even call him a Dawah man, but he had like a PhD in Islam. I don't remember his qualifications, but that was on Twitter, and we were friendly. More hostile in public for some reason, but he was friendlier in the DMs. But no, none of the Dawah names. I think I'm just too small of a fish. There's bigger fish to fry at the moment, which is good, you know. Keep doing what you're doing. Let me do what I do. Oh, someone's thank you for the super chat, free peace love. Sorry I didn't see this earlier. I appreciate it. They say I'm happily an ex-Muslim woman now. I'm happy for you. Welcome to the club. And thanks to Infidel Noodle once again. Congratulations on 10K. I appreciate it. And I'm sure there's going to be 1,000 people asking her, Noodle, when's your next video going to be? Are you still making videos? So yeah, get those out of the way. Ask her all in the live chat. And Bakali Pino says, please hit 10 million subscribers. I sure hope not, because that would be terrifying, but I hope that the channel continues to grow. But I appreciate the sentiment. Again, going all the way back. Serendipity says, short hair for men in certain regions. In Europe, in earlier times, longer hair was the norm. Also, long hair on American Indian men was culturally acceptable. Crazy how things change, huh? How old are you? Let's just say I'm in my mid to late 20s. And it's cool that those religious advertisers spend money on your audience because they're not going to convince anyone here and it will just lose their resources. It's not the best return on investment, but it's for a good cause. Let's see. Okay, Rachel Qureshi is asking, I had a question about something religious people have been sharing, and I thought it'd be cool if you addressed it. Man, I've addressed it before. It's about comparing incest to homosexuality. Why is that even a thing? In the religious apologist's mind, at least like the mainstream ones, getting to a reductive position that they can easily strawman is the best strategy. So to point out, this is like that, and we hate that, therefore you're wrong. When there's no link there, they're just making the link between taboo in their minds. Taboo, homosexuality is taboo, incest is taboo. Well, not the cousin type, because that's allowed Islamically and practiced all over the world. But sister, brother incest is taboo. Homosexuality is taboo. Therefore, these things are exactly the same and they're both taboo. It's such a simplistic, idiotic way of thinking about it. And I don't use that word often. It's just that I've heard this example way too often. And same thing, they compare it to bestiality. And that's not just Muslims. I remember Christian fundamentalists, or a lot of Christians at large, would say, well, what's next? You're allowed to marry your pet or something? Anyway, if they even listen to reason, you'd have to break it down to them that the difference between two consenting adults who have no biological connection, no reason to not be attracted to each other, like two women or two men, that's very different than you being attracted to your sibling, which is not only disgusting to you personally, but biologically disadvantageous because it's dangerous if you ever do have offspring. And then they turn it into a very silly argument about what if you use protection or whatever. And it gets you thinking, why are they really focused on incest? Well, this brand of incest, rather than actually addressing the point that is, there's nothing stopping two people of the same gender of loving each other except because God thinks it's icky. That's it. That's all they have to go off of. Like they might try to rationalize it and say, well, because of this reason, and like it ruins families and whatnot. There's no reason these days. It's just, it's draining. I try not to argue with them too much. That is true. Um, it's not the eyes that are blind, but the hearts. That reminds me, there are verses, I don't know if it's more than one, where God says something in their hearts, في قلوبهم أفلا يتفكرون, do they not ponder or think? So if you mention hearts and thinking at the same time, one could easily criticize and say, duh, dummy, you don't do any thinking with the pump organ. But let's say God meant it metaphorically, like your heart is your emotional center and all that. How are you reasoning with your emotions? So all these examples about God hardened your heart or like blocked your heart or something like that, and you can't think, you can't ponder. It's an admission that this is about how you feel. You feel scared, you feel weak, you feel vulnerable, you feel I don't know, submissive. That's all feeling. That's not thinking. So their accusation that the eyes, it's not the eyes that are blind, but the hearts. What the hell does a heart have to do with thinking? What does emotion have to do with the reality of things? Um, Again, an asinine line of thinking from apologists. They say the verse about wife beating, I've heard these like justifications given to me by women even. Well, Islam allowed you to beat your wife because what if the wife is harming the kids? What if she's about to like suffocate the children? Like you're supposed to go and self defend and defend your children. Who's coming up with this fantastical scenario based off of you're allowed to beat your wife if you fear her disobedience? I mean, does it really, if God really wanted to account for a scenario where the husband is waiting around thinking, my wife is strangling my child, should I do something about this? Or is Allah going to punish me? Let me think. Allah didn't say I can beat my wife. This is such a conundrum. Oh, well, I guess I'm going to sacrifice my child because I'm confused. That's never going to happen. If Allah wanted to be clear, He would say, feel free to beat each other up if it means defending your child from immediate harm. Like, what a fantastical scenario to come up with. It's just trying to figure out a way to make it make sense. Anyhow. What is next after Islam? So that's about when I was saying that Islam, if it even came to improve the situation at all in pre-Islamic Arabia, if that is true, there's evolution of ideas past that. What is next after Islam? There's the focus on human lives, and some might want to include even all living things. Excuse me for a some might even want to include all living things like animals and plants as well, or at least focusing on more sentient beings like animals, or yeah, more conscious beings. The humanism focusing on humans and benefiting ourselves and our environment the most, or not harming our environment more. It's the idea of preservation and thriving. I think that's the vaguely where we need to be headed. If we just keep living as if this is just a phase, this is a vessel, so we could get to the afterlife, a lot of people are going to be harmed in the meantime because we really think that the harm is going to be undone when they die. So, yeah, there's not going to be one label to replace Islam or the other religion or something. It's going to be so many different ideas that we just have to figure out what works best for everybody, what works best for each situation. Yeah. Please get I don't know what that number is. A million, 10 million subs. I'll do my best, but I don't think it'll go that high. um, okay. I have Muslim friends who are so into conspiracies, it's ridiculous what they believe and how far it goes. So, like I've said before, that applies to religious, I don't even want to say fundamentalists, but a lot of people who are deeply religious in from many different backgrounds. You've seen that in the US, for example, the people who happen to be in support of a certain candidate very, very, very blindly, and also very, very religious, and also they believe that there's conspiracies going on, that the earth is flat, that there's a lot of this stuff that often is a cluster together. Because once you're receptive to a certain idea without skepticism, once you believe that there's not only a higher power and things that you don't know, but you diminish your intelligence so much. I've talked about this before, where if you're genuinely convinced that God knows everything and you're too stupid to understand God, even when you're just trying to reason, why did God do this and not that? It doesn't make sense that God would punish those people or others. If you got to the point of believing that you're just the idiot for not believing that and God knows better, you've diminished your mind, and now you will believe that way or think that way about so many things in life. There must be things that are too big for me to understand. And that on its own is not a bad mentality to have. I know there's so many things in the world I can't understand, but at least I'll try to. But to a lot of those people, they've already accepted a grand, huge conspiracy based on emotions and fear and or good feelings, based on hope, not based on facts. So you just put in another conspiracy or something that's adjacent to it, like these are signs of the day of judgment that also happen to be this group taking over the world and all that stuff, and it's easy for them to swallow. So that is one reason why I'm, in a sense, anti-theist, because when you accept theism in as a concept, it's belief without evidence. That is what faith is. And once you've let that guard down for something so huge that dictates your whole life, you will probably do it again for other things like conspiracy theories. Tanky, that's a very good question. Have you watched Wild Wild Country on Netflix? It was actually way more nuanced than I thought it would be. Pretty sad, all in all. I watched Wild Wild Country when I was really on the fence about things. Like, I had known at that point that I'm really confused. It wasn't that I was finding things out for the first time, but I was just, I didn't really know of the label ex-Muslim. I didn't really know that this is valid to actually land on this position. And I watched Wild Wild Country, and it's a documentary about a cult, for those who don't know. It's interesting. Um, and yeah, it can be sad at times. I watched and I was thinking, oh, I feel bad for those people. How couldn't they see it from the outside? How couldn't they see that this guy was just, you know, even if he believed it, he was manipulating them and so on. And then I realized, wait a second, there's a lot of parallels there. And then, but no, but Islam is different because that one's legitimate. This guy's a charlatan. But why? Because it happened so long ago, and everybody I know tells me that it happened so long ago, and there's a book that says that it happened so long ago. But effectively, if there were no technology and someone wrote a book about this guy and kept adding pages to the book, or someone just kept adding to the lore of who he was, we could end up today believing that this guy was a prophet. Even if he wasn't, that could be the case. And that got me thinking, okay, I get that this guy is clearly not a prophet, but isn't it a very likely possibility that my prophet started off the same way? Like, what a statistical anomaly that so many other religions, or all of them except mine, all of them have the same characteristics or similar characteristics. They're all about someone who claims, usually a man, claims to have a message from God and so on. So how come this one? So anyway, it was very eye-opening for me. Secular Spirit says, what will you do when you hit 50,000 subscribers? Well, I appreciate the confidence when you hit, not if you hit 50,000 subscribers. I don't know. I really have no idea. If people want to give suggestions, the reason why I'm celebrating this is just I didn't want to really, it didn't come up to me to just do it, but I know that it's an important milestone. I want to tell people that I am appreciative of all of this, and I want them to have a chance to celebrate the good things. And even if 10K is a small number compared to a lot of other YouTubers talking about this topic, especially on the other side of things, I'm very, very happy with it. And I hope everyone else is too. So 50K, I'll just be, I don't know, 5 times as excited. I don't think if is that ever gonna happen, but like me being that excited, I don't know. Moves reveal at 50K. Yeah, I don't know if that's ever gonna happen either. Um, Base reveal? Oh, you mean face reveal? I don't know if I can reveal any base. I'm all about that base, no treble. Hmm. Scrolling. No, I did not hear that. So Zagros is a recurring caller slash commenter here, and cool. He helped all three of his cousins remove their hijabs. Well, I'm happy for them. I'm happy for them. Susa, hey, Susa was on the live stream the other week. The live stream about the hijab. Thanks for coming back. What do you advise regarding coming out to Muslim parents? It's something on my mind. Take it with a grain of salt because I am not a social worker. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a mediator between families. I'm not even that old and experienced. But, so take anything that I will say with a grain of salt. My point of view is self-preservation first. See what outcome is best for you or what possible outcome is best for you. If that means that you have to come out because it's weighing too heavily on you and you can't just keep pretending or living a double life, do what you got to do. If you think that you're going to be in danger or it's going to lower your chances of being independent if you come out at this time, don't do it. Like, you have to be strategical about it. You have to make sure that you are doing the best thing for you. Don't worry so much about other people's reactions unless it has to do with how that's going to affect your life. Is it going to make it more difficult? Is it going to make it more difficult, but you're going to gain your independence and, peace of mind? Everyone's situation is different. Just don't rush into things. And we have this sense of wanting to tell our truth, especially when we realize that your entire world has been a sham, in a sense. If you do feel that way, at least I did. And you feel very compelled to talk to the people that you supposedly trust and have strong bonds with, like family members, and tell them, hey, like, how come? Or like, I just want to be honest with you. This is how I feel. But it's best that you make sure that you direct that enthusiasm and all those emotions in a healthy way somewhere else before you risk talking to a family about it. Perhaps your family would take it well, perhaps not, but you have to assess that situation for yourself. Yeah. Hmm. Okay, that's a good point. So I was talking earlier about conspiracy theories and how theism makes you more receptive to them. But that is also a good point that when you leave a door open explicitly for the Antichrist is coming or something, even Christians might believe this. When you leave that door explicitly open, then a lot of things start to go through that door. A lot of things start to fit. So it's not just the concept of believing in the unseen without proof and conspiracies and all that. A specific one that's not specific enough, because one could think that the Dajjal with one eye is representative of cameras, and that has to do with the, I don't know, surveillance culture and all that sort of data collection, and one can easily extrapolate from that to say that's a sign of the Dajjal, and so on and so forth. One can say that it's a particular person or group and a particular movement. So, yeah, you're right about how that primes people for conspiracies when you leave them a door open. Um, hmm. Gaming in the New World. So I've heard this one before. Muhammad said a human has 360 joints. So I don't remember what there might have been a hadith where Muhammad claims that a human has 360 joints. There might have been a hadith where he said something different or like an estimate. And I think that scientists disagree about how many joints there are because of how you define a joint, but it's not that number. But at the end of the day, people think that it's so amazing, as if people back then didn't even know how to wipe their own asses, so to speak. Like, as if people didn't already, like, you could look at a skeleton and count the bones and the joints. What's so difficult about that? Even if he got the number down to exactly the right number, he doesn't have to get a skeleton and count. Like, he was in in contact with so many people. There was so much information being transmitted orally that he could have learned from a trader or whoever, someone who heard it from the Chinese or something. That's, I believe that there's a Chinese source for this number as well. I don't remember. It's not like he had to invent an MRI to take a look at how many joints there are in a human body. People make it seem like those people really lived in completely dark ages. They still had a mind. They could still observe things. So when someone says, how did Muhammad say, allegedly, that there are 360 joints and we have roughly the same number, isn't that a sign that he's from God? No, if that is true at all, it's a sign that he can count, or that someone in that time can count. So yeah, just think about these things a bit deeper. Misha Hector says, do you get overwhelmed thinking how Islam is one of the biggest violent lies in history? How does that affect your perception of humans in general? Meaning, cannot believe so many are in that cult. So it used to stress me out more than it does, and it really comes and goes in waves almost. I was so disappointed in humanity in general at first. And then I realized it's not because they lack humanity, it's because of humanity that they're easily manipulated. That we have that flaw. All of us have that flaw. You can't critically examine every single thing in your life from a very young age against all social norms, against common knowledge. It's just not possible for everyone to do. So at first I was upset. I was thinking, how could so many people be so horrible, like, or not even be horrible, believe in such horrible things? Doesn't that make them horrible? No, because most of them haven't deeply, deeply thought about it and realized those conclusions without so much influence and threat and indoctrination. And some people just don't have the luxury of time to get into it, or education or exposure to other ideas. Like, there are many people who, if I was born in their shoes, I might end up being in their shoes today. That's how I ended up thinking about it. And it makes me sad, but it just makes me want to keep doing what I'm doing so that they don't end up with ideas that are harmful to themselves and others. It is shocking to me, though, how not only common Islam acceptance is, but it's almost as if sometimes it's becoming more common because of PC culture, because of feeling like people are guilty about their own race or what people are doing to people of color. Therefore, we have to be extra accommodating to this religion that is often attached to people of color, even if it's not necessarily. But it's upsetting to me to see how normalized Islam has become, when what we need to do is have Muslims really think about their faith so that they're not ostracized by being Muslim or by alliance with Islam. Because if I'm being honest, if I could guarantee that every Muslim has thought about their religion and has studied it and has thought deeply about it, if that was the case, which would never be the case, you could not apply that to any philosophy or religion or group. If that was the case, I would be very unlikely to even try to get along with a believer. Because if you've taken it as a given that all these things in Islam are fair and right and true, I feel like we're on very different pages in life. And one of the reasons why I still have an open mind and I still talk to everyone, even Muslims, as if, let's see if we get along kind of thing, is because I can't guarantee that they all have reached their conclusions or that they all know everything about what they actually believe. But if they did, like, to be honest with you, I don't see myself ever getting along with someone like, one of the popular da'wah preachers who did spend a lot of time thinking about this and have reached their conclusions. If everyone had given it that much thought, then that label would be a more dangerous label. Then you would really have to pay attention when someone says, I'm a Muslim. But right now it's ambiguous because Muslims don't even know what they believe. They don't even know the full extent of it. So
I always maintain that you can't prejudge someone completely just because they say I belong to such and such religion. But it does shock me and upset me sometimes that it's just it's been watered down so much that we have no issue with people aligning with a harmful religion, and we have to presume the best. But it is how it is. If Muhammad was alive now, Marco says, would he embrace YouTube and other social media or despise it? Well, considering how he had like a few followers at first and then a lot more, I feel like he would gain a lot of traction. Actually, I don't know if he started from scratch. Like, do religions exist in this reality? Like, is he the first like TikToker, religious TikToker or something? I don't know. Um, he would probably warn heavily against it and hope for like an Islam only social network, kind of Islam only internet. Absolutely. Yeah, someone was asking about drawings and whatnot, and unfortunately, many Muslims do believe that drawings, especially of animals or humans, are haram because you're challenging God or you're imitating God's creation. So, yeah. Anyhow, I will read a few more comments and then might have to call it a day. You could interview your cats, Emron says. See what they have to say about 50K. They just say more kibble, please. Nose reveal at 50K. Yeah, I'm going to piecewise it. I'm going to give you a piece of my face for every 250K. Live karaoke stream. Nobody wants to hear that. I'll reach 50K, do a live karaoke stream, and then go down to 10K again. So, no. Oh, Kryptonite Flame, thanks for the super chat. Do you think the Prophet body in Medina is actually his? I don't know if there's actually a body in there or not. I really don't know, but they could check. They could do a DNA test, and there are people who claim to be descendants. They could, but I think it's haram. Or they could just open the casket and see if there's a human there who hasn't decomposed, because allegedly, or not the casket, whatever, dig him out or something, because allegedly prophets don't decompose. So let's do it. Gorilla. Okay, I'm not going to read all that. But Gorilla Swaggering says, how do you talk to a devout friend about the horrible side of Islam without making it seem like you're trying to enforce your beliefs on them? Well, you can't. Well, that's the thing. They're going to feel like you're enforcing your beliefs on them, even though all you're doing is providing the opposing side of you. That's because they're used to growing up in an environment where anyone who says anything opposing to Islam is forcing it down their throats. Like, if people want to hold hands in public and they're gay, that's forcing homosexuality down my throat. You know, you're forcing your belief on me. But that's not forcing your belief on them. But if you mean to ask, how do you delicately pose it so that they don't like feel offended or lash out or feel attacked? That's difficult to answer not knowing them. But perhaps you could pose it as, make it very clear that you're asking questions, that you want to understand how they think, that you're not trying to pull them out of Islam, but asking them, what do you believe given the rest of your faith? What do you believe about this or that thing in Islam? I try to be delicate about it. Okay. Oh, I think I might have caught up with the comments for the most part. I might have missed a few, so yes, if you have any last questions, feel free to drop them before I go, and also don't forget to like and subscribe to see more and all that good stuff. Yeah, and in a couple of days, I have a live stream with a popular ex-Christian critic of Islam, Adam al-Masri, so don't miss that. That's an interesting one. Misha Hector says, has anyone thought of this? According to Islam, Jesus will come back to earth and break the cross. I was worried for my Christian friends because I thought they would see him as Antichrist. That's a very good point. If you were taught to look out for the Antichrist looking that way, or the other, or the outsider, or the evil, as soon as you see a sign like that, you would immediately take that position. So would your Christian friend be a bad person who didn't embrace Islam, or were they just raised that way? I thought about it, but not with the example of the Antichrist, but that's a good one. The Alke says, if you were in an interfaith relationship with a Muslim, would you accept your kid to be raised Muslim? I would not be in an interfaith relationship with Muslim, and probably not with a religious person in general, because, like I said earlier, it's a very different outlook on life. Say, for example, let me put it this way. Say you want to have a roommate and adopt a pet with them, okay? Roommate and a pet. And they're telling you that they're only in town for a year, and then after the year, they're going to move on to something better, who knows, something like that. And they're living their life, making decisions about what furniture to buy, what renovations to do around the house and stuff like that, as if they're going to leave in a year and maybe never come back. How would I be partners with someone who believes that in the afterlife we're going to different places, that some things in life don't matter because God's going to make up for it in the afterlife, or some things in life matter way more than they actually do because they might might end up ruining your afterlife? It's a completely different way to go about living, and some people might be able to manage it. I don't think I can. So, yeah, I wouldn't be in that position to begin with, but I know some people end up being in that position because they end up questioning their faith later, or the person they're with ends up embracing the religion. It's difficult to be in that situation. Would I accept my kids to be raised Muslim? I think both of us would have to tell the kid about how we view the world and let them decide, because the other parent had a say in bringing the kid to life. And in many ways, the woman would have sacrificed more in the process of actually bringing the kid to life than I would have. So she does have a say in how to raise it. But ideally, I wouldn't be in that situation to begin with. But I would still want to tell them how I view the world and then let them decide and make them realize that, at the very least, Islam is not the only way to think, because I grew up thinking this is the default and everyone else is wrong. And we hope that they turn to the right side, but they're wrong. I will make them realize, no, this is not unanimous by any means. Most of the world is not Muslim, but it's not just a game of numbers. There's a lot to be desired from these answers. So, yeah. What are your cats' names? So, for the live streams, I call them Apu and Iago. Look at him. He's always begging for attention. But I fed him this morning, so I guess maybe it's lunchtime or dinner time. Cool. All right, I'll just keep him in frame. Why not? If you can even see him. Oh no, the banner was covering him up. Now my name is covering him up. Oops. Here. Okay. And now he's gone. Moving on. Thanks again for the super chat, Kryptonite Flame. I really appreciate it. Some people be monitoring the number of viewers and just writing nice all the time. That's a nice number to be around. Misha Hector says, I would never be in a relationship, period. Well, I hope that you're ever in a relationship, that it's good for you. But if you don't want to be in one, then, you shouldn't be in one. Miro says, the Antichrist would have an infidel on his forehead. But here's what's funny. If I wrote here, like ex-Muslim, or if I wrote here the name of my channel or a mask or something, right? If I put a mask, like people were saying I should have merch with like a mask or something. Say I have a mask on here. That is symbolic of my channel, right? Of leaving Islam and whatever, of being an infidel. Someone can easily point at me and say, look, that's the Dajjal right there. And the Dajjal doesn't have to be one person. It could be a movement. It could be the idea itself. It's what I symbolize. So, sorry, the cat is just looking at the screen right now. So that would be funny. Don't sit on my keyboard, please. Not with your butt, especially. It would be very interesting to have a discussion with Muhammad. that could go so many different ways. But imagine if I end up like questioning him about his beliefs, and he's like, you know what? I never thought about it that way. No, that would make me the Antichrist. Do you think if Muhammad somehow came back to life, and he could prove that he was Muhammad, he'd do exactly the same things that allegedly he did and people believed him for? Do you think Muslims would believe it? Because I don't think the narrative says that he would come back and like split the moon and all that. If he did all the miracles that the Abrahamic religions say that the prophets did, if he, I don't know, if he spanked a dead man with a piece of meat and the dead man came to life, if he split the ocean, would people believe that he's Prophet Muhammad, or would he be called a heretic and a magician and the Dajjal and all that stuff? That would be very interesting. And what would they think if he said, actually, everybody got it all wrong? I am the image of God. Like the Christians got it wrong too. It would just be pandemonium. I would love to see that. I would love to interview him on my live stream. Now that's one way to get to 10 million for sure. Uh, that would be so funny. Well, thank you, AHB28 says, thanks for making these videos. You're the most rational ex-Muslim content creator I've seen. Keep it up. Well, I'm worried about or hesitant to take such a label, but I appreciate that you find my videos rational and enjoyable. Mhm. Roxy Baby says, if the people I love would go to hell, I'd rather join them than sitting in heaven and having thoughts of them burning, to be honest, just to make a statement. See, that will be interpreted by a believer as you're choosing to burn in hell. That's one thing that I found is the whole like me mentality in religion. If I wanted to bring as much people as I can to heaven with me, I would be spending my every waking moment not just like supporting dawah channels, but doing it myself. I would be studying Islam perfectly to make sure that I understand it well and to make sure that I save as many people as possible. I'm telling you right now, if I somehow wasn't convinced that, if I somehow was convinced of Islam after all this questioning, I would have quit my job. I would have started a YouTube channel or a way or some avenue to find all the people who haven't understood and to give them the answers that I'm finding. I would do my very best to sacrifice my life to bring as many people as possible to heaven with me. Yet, most people don't do that. And this is why I empathize with not all da'wah men, but like people who genuinely believe, preachers who genuinely believe that they're doing good and they're saving people from hell and all that. I empathize. If you truly mean it, if this is how you grew up, if that's how your brain works, I get that you're trying to do it for a good reason. So I didn't understand the Islamically accepted position of like, oh, well, you tell people the truth. If they don't believe you, then you just watch them from hell and laugh at them if they used to laugh at you in this life. That never made sense to me, that people would laugh at anyone in hell, even if it was a horrible person who stole and killed and whatnot. It's still a very stupid, not stupid, flawed human mentality of vindictiveness and anger and I'm in heaven, but like I still won. Ha ha ha. It's, yeah. So it baffles me when I see that Muslims believe what they believe, but don't live their every waking moment trying to save themselves from hell and everyone else around them. And yet the accusation is that someone like myself or a kafir in general is trying to pull as many people as they can to hell with them. Kind of like shaitan. It's trying to take as many people as possible to hell with him. So what I'm trying to do the very opposite. I'm trying to help as many people as possible, but it's framed as me trying to lead astray as many people as possible. So you see how good religion can be at reframing things, or cults in general. They frame it so that you're seeing the same event, but from a very different lens. This is not a guy who's trying to help people. This is a guy who's trying to take them to hell with him. So, yeah. Anyway, now let's get to the next question. It is forbidden for Muslims to raise their children as anything but Muslim. At least that's what I was taught. I think so, but yeah, I don't know if I had a Muslim partner, if my partner would agree to that. No idea. What's your opinion on Ahmadi Islam? Ali is saying, no opinion, but I will be talking to people who are more knowledgeable on that. So, yeah, no opinion on that. Now, a few more comments before I go. Secular Spirit says, what do you think of Muslims who say they'll accept it if accept if other people aren't Muslim as long as they're happy and not harming anyone? I think that's most feasibly the best position to take, because you can't ask for more than that, to be honest. But at the same time, it's still almost contradictory, or it makes it seem like they're lacking empathy on some level. Because someone might hear me and say, well, what do you want them to do then? Like, you want them to do da'wah or not? No, what I'm saying is this is feasibly the best position you can take from my point of view as a Muslim, is just, the lakum dinukum waliya din approach. You have your religion, I have mine, as long as nobody's harming the other. But in that sentence, they might think that you standing up for gay rights, for example, is harming people, so they're going to oppose it. I don't know to what extent that goes. But ideally, a Muslim would be trying to save as many people as possible from hell. And that position is not really doing that. But again, it's contradictory, so I can't ask them for more than that. Yeah, so that whole spat between, okay, let me give you let me spill the tea about the whole God Shaitan thing. So Allah knew that the Shaitan was going to disobey him, and disobey him by saying, I'm not going to bow down to a thing that you created. So say the Shaitan was egotistical there. You're not supposed to bow down to anyone but Allah, right? That's at least the way I understood it. So the Shaitan saying, I'm not going to bow down to a human. You created me from fire, him from clay, whatever. And Allah took it personally. And I took that personally. And he's like, how dare you? Then you need to go back to the earth, or whatever, to the ground. But also in another instance, he was in heaven tempting Adam and Eve, or tempting Adam to eat the apple. Which is it? I don't know. But either way, God said, okay, you want to disobey me? Then go. You can go to earth now. And Shaitan said, no, wait. Allah said, you can go to earth, but you can tempt people, but the true believers are not going to be tempted. So Allah led this weapon of mass destruction of an unseeable, supernatural being that controls your thoughts in a sense. It can influence you in ways you don't even realize, just for funsies, so he could see who listens and who doesn't. And if you say certain prayers, sometimes it might work at getting that shaitan away. What is this fun game of like cat and mouse? Like, if Allah was truly good, wouldn't he want to test such people without influence, like testing them even though he knows they're the outcome anyway? It's such a weird, twisted game that doesn't make any sense, that Allah is like letting this invisible, powerful being influence you and then blaming you, even though he knows that you were created to eventually follow in that way. It's, yeah. One way to describe Islam. People aren't going to like this, but no, it's hard to reduce it to one word, because not one word is not going to be enough. Because if I just use one word, it discards everything else. Like, I want to say, for example, harmful. I think that's a decent word, but obviously there's a lot of people who weren't that harmed by it growing up in it, so it doesn't apply to everybody. But I want to say encompassing isn't even the right word. Totalitarian, that's a word that describes Islam. Overwhelming, overpowering. It takes over your entire existence. Absurd. There's so many words, but I can't just use one. I want to say cultish, because by classification, it does meet all the criteria to be classified as a cult. I don't say that as an insult to Muslims. It is a cult. So it's hard to just put it in one word. UK Dawah boys. What's the word for wannabe gangster, or for like ratchet? Ratchet is the word. Maybe. Whatever the UK equivalent of ratchet is. Chav? Is chav a word? I don't know. One word to describe your channel. From my point of view, or people's point of view, I don't know, because I have a generally harsh critique of myself and my channel and stuff. So I would classify it in a way that's not as favorable as someone else would. So yeah, I'm gonna go with this answer by Tanky. Growing. Growing is a good answer. Yeah. Hopefully safe. From my point of view, I would say fulfilling. And that may seem funny when you think about, me making jokes and stuff, but I think purposeful is also another word. So yeah, girl me about that. Secular Spirit again asking, can Muslims really accept a non-believer if they also believe you're going to hell? It is it's a paradoxical position to take. How can you accept that your friend or neighbor or a stranger that you don't dislike is going to hell and just go about your day-to-day life? Like, if I told you that someday randomly, you're my roommate or friend or whatever, someday randomly someone's going to come in and kill you. Worse than that, someone's going to come in and abduct you and do horrible things to you. And I just go about my everyday like, oh yeah, what are we going to have for dinner? Are we going to order takeout? Like, how do you go about your life after that? And not only that, if I tell you someone's going to someday abduct you, and it's a reality in my mind, and I'm like, but you chose it. You chose to be abducted. Like, I don't know what to say. Anyway, what do you want to eat for dinner? It doesn't make sense to me. How is this not the focus of your entire existence? How are you going about your day-to-day life after that? And then you feel crazy as an ex-Muslim when you point out all of this and people are like, why can't you just coexist? Have you tried having those ideas in your mind and coexisting? Punished in hellfire for eternity. In the meantime, want to get some ramen. Well, splurge at least, get me sushi or something. I'm gonna burn in hell forever. Ramen, how dare you? Yoko Tsuno says, do you believe in Yoko Tsuno? Do you believe in some form of reincarnation? No, I have no reason to, so I haven't. No. Abu Bakr says the one word for the channel is relaxing. Well, thank you. I would say to teach people, Jordan says, I would teach people that faith is a reliable method to decide what is true or false is already harmful. Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. To use faith as a method of determining what is right or wrong is a harmful vessel for worse things. How often do you think of Islam in a day-to-day basis? So that varies. There are days where I make sure to turn off notifications from all my social media stuff. That's even my personal social media. I don't like it being intrusive and pulling my attention away, but especially my Aladdin stuff, I have notifications off for the most part. So I tend to not think about it unless I'm, from a channel's point of view, unless I choose to open the YouTube channel or something and look into what's going on. But it does come up every day because of other people in my life who still follow Islam, because of like reminders of Islam everywhere you go in every country in the world. Islam is a thing. And not only is a thing, it's an accepted thing, which is sad by many standards. It's if you care about human rights, you would care about not furthering an idea that is anti many humans' rights. Sure, it might be nice on face value, but like do charity, be nice to your neighbor, all that good stuff. But it cuts deeper than that. And unfortunately, there's reminders all around us of this stuff. And because of what I chose to do on a regular basis here with the channel, it ends up being a daily reminder these days. So for the most part, yes. But I try to take a couple of days where I have like absolutely no reminders of my channel or anything related. But yeah. Ali, this channel is getting close to 1 million total views. How do you feel about that? Actually, we have surpassed 1 million total views. YouTube tells me maybe it doesn't show on publicly, but we have surpassed 1 million total views. So thank you, everyone. It feels unreal. And the only thing that makes it feel less crazy and makes me not panic is that other channels have reached way, way more, other big and small channels. So it makes me feel like I'm not that visible, because too much visibility can be unnerving. But I'm very happy about it. I know if I went back 2 years and told myself you're going to be viewed over 1 million times around the world, I wouldn't believe it, and I still don't. Sometimes I don't think about it too deeply because it's almost scarier to let it sink in what that actually means. Like there was one time that I looked at some statistic, and that month alone, 30,000 different people had seen me. At least 30,000 different devices had viewed my videos on one platform or another, at least. That's a crazy amount of people. I used to be too nervous to give a lecture or a presentation in front of 20 people in a classroom. But I overcame that eventually. And now it's a lot bigger than that. And I wonder if someday, no, I was going to say, I wonder if someday I'm going to be talking in a real lecture hall or something. But I don't think that, I don't see myself as someone who's giving you some like nuggets of wisdom and like, here's my lecture about it. I make a video that I put thought and effort into, and then I present it as a video. You can watch it at your own pace. You don't have to be there in front of me. In live streams, maybe I would conduct some kind of conversation in public in front of an audience, maybe, but I don't foresee myself standing in front of an audience and just talking. I don't know. Roxy says, you know you are really good at debating, do you? Why don't you do that more often? No fun. I've been told I'm good at debating, even though I don't really get into debates. Multiple reasons why I haven't gotten into it. First of all, like I said before, there are some things that once you start debating, you're almost like giving them legitimacy as if it's something to be debated, and we shouldn't be doing that. Sometimes it's a barrier because it becomes about winning and losing and who's better at debating rather than the ideas themselves. That's another thing, because someone can be a very good debater and just argue and win in the eyes of the audience, whether that's rightfully so or not, and their idea is the wrong one or a harmful one. That doesn't seem like the most productive way to go about a conversation. When you take the pressure out of it of who's winning, or like let's see who the audience decides is better or more charismatic or whatever, if it's just a conversation, then the other person's more likely to tell you more honestly and tell themselves more honestly what they think. They have a second to breathe rather than thinking, what do I say next to get back at them? Or what do I say next to save myself from this predicament that I'm in? Who's keeping score? All that kind of stuff. I don't want the other person to be there. And what else? And also the kind of audience that comes around because of debates. People can watch debates and they can be fine people. I'm not saying that if you watch debates, you're a toxic kind of audience. But if you usually it attracts the kind of people who want drama, or at least those come with the audience. So it could help my channel explode in viewership, but then it just becomes, did you see that debate? Aladdin destroys whoever, or who destroyed Aladdin? And it returns a lot of hostility, and that's not what I'm looking for. So yeah, I hope that answers that. Who knows, maybe in the future, but probably not. And Bob says, do you still have other streams of income, example, employment? Up until a couple of months ago, I was a full-time employee since, for years now. But lately, like I've announced, I needed to take time off to be able to put in more effort here. So as of right now, it's savings and a side gig, but barely, and whatever I get from YouTube and Patreon. So if you do want to become a subscriber, member, whatever, Patreon would be the best place to do that. But anything's appreciated, and even if you can't or don't want to, I appreciate your viewership alone. Hey, what's good? How's it going? That's a good point. Tanky says, David Wood is a great debater, but it doesn't make Christianity true. Yeah. And I wonder if someday I would get in a conversation with him. And that's something I'm hesitant to do. So I want to talk to David Wood, not because I want to get to his audience. That is why I don't want to take. That's why I don't want to talk to David Wood, because I don't want part of his audience that, like, the part of it that I wouldn't appreciate. But I want to ask him questions about Christianity that other people haven't put him on the spot about. I want him to explain concepts to me that I don't understand about Christianity, and I want him to tell me his point of view, because either I'm going to learn something I didn't learn before, or I'm going to push back on certain ideas, and it's going to be finally someone in public giving him a run for his money. You know what I mean? But I'm hesitant to do that because I don't want the wrong kind of boost to my channel. Yo says, do you believe in marriage? I don't know if that's the right question. Believe in, what does believing in marriage mean? You mean, do I think it's a good idea? Or if I was married, do I believe in that institution of marriage? I don't know. I think marriage is a pleasant idea, and if someone wants to put a name on their partnership and make it official in a sense and all that, then yeah, it's a good idea. Bob asks, do you think you could ever convert to Islam again if you have a new profound religious experience that convinces you, or new information that convinces you? Two different questions here, good ones. If I have a profound religious experience that convinces me, I highly doubt it. Say I was overwhelmed with this feeling of euphoria and understanding of the world, and trust me, sometimes, be it because of a dream or because of the influence of certain substances or whatever, you might have this feeling, and we might have had this feeling in a dream, that you understand a certain concept. It's this vague idea, but when you wake up, you're like, wait, that didn't actually make sense, but I felt like it makes sense. You know what I mean? So I would question myself. Was I in a chemically induced state of mind, of belief? That religious experience, like I saw God or Muhammad or some other entity, did I actually see this? Or was it, when we're talking about Islam, did I actually see this character, or was it chemicals? And if I did see this character, okay, cool. Now I'm even more confused, because on one hand, say this truly actually happened to me, what does that say about all the other questions that I have? Like everything, all the other contentions that I have with Islam, all that would prove, if I even take that as proof, that, okay, Allah or Muhammad exist, but they still have a lot to answer for. I mean, I will obey if I truly, truly believe that this is real, I'm going to go to hell and all that. I will obey. But is that what God wants if I'm dishonestly obeying just because I want to save my butt? But new information, if somehow new information comes to light that answers all of the questions that I've had, I would still ask, how come this information isn't public knowledge? Why is it so secret and guarded? I would go out on with a microphone and tell people about what I found and be like, everyone, I was wrong before. Here are all the answers. But I would still ask, how about all the people who died genuinely convinced because they didn't have that magical answer that somehow is going to cover up all these holes. So very unlikely, if not impossible. And I definitely agree with that. Ali says mainstream Muslim debaters just care about gotcha moments rather than having a conversation. See, every time someone would praise me about my approach, I'd be like, I don't understand. I'm just talking here. And then I watch the Muslim debaters and YouTubers, and I think, how are they so abhorrent and how does nobody seem to care? And then I realize I look like a saint next to them. The way that they talk to other people and the way that they formulate their ideas, absolute nonsense. So maybe you're right. I don't know. Hassan Adwan says, there's nothing to debate. As someone said, Islam has never been proven in the first place. Hassan Adwan quoting me to me is the best thing to ever happen to the ex-Muslim movement. Changed my mind. At least from my point of view. Oh, God. I said, oh, God, am I a believer? Kuro said, why did you show up on my front page? Because the algorithm is doing its job. That's the conspiracy theory right there. The algorithm wants you to disbelieve. So Ali Ramzi says, to be honest, if I die a Muslim and nothing happens, I would still be glad that I avoided addictive substance like alcohol and drugs and zina. I wouldn't have missed much besides 5 minutes every day to praying. And that's the thing. If Islam doesn't get in the way of your life very much, especially as a guy, I'm assuming Ali, then so be it. You're not losing much. And this is like, I'm not an advocate for alcohol and drugs and premarital sex just because you don't believe. These things in moderation can be harmful or they can be good. I don't have a position on that. I think everyone should assess for their own well-being. But if it doesn't affect you much, then that's a position to take. Like, you could just go through life like that. But doesn't it bother you how others are going to go to hell for very petty reasons or simply truly not believing in that religion? That would bother me more than having to pray every day multiple times. Like, it wasn't the obligation of it, it was just the confusion of it. Yeah. And also, something to note about this, some people pose Islam as a solution for addictions or solution for any of the problems in society. That's not true, though. Just because there's a rule that says don't do drugs or don't drink or don't have premarital sex doesn't mean that it fixes that problem, if that is a problem in someone's life or in a society. Premarital sex is its own category, but just about the drugs and alcohol for now. But what actually happens is that those people go through it. They don't have the resources to help. Sometimes there's shame because you shouldn't publicize your sin, or they just end up dying or killing themselves, or something happens because it's not acknowledged as an open problem because you're just not supposed to. That's the solution right there. Just don't do it. So it's posed as a solution, but more often than not, it doesn't really do much to stop things. Actually, there is a commenter here that's saying something similar. FS is saying, I know I was a former addict and I still struggle with stuff. Also, something that's so taboo amongst religious people, but even devout Muslims can fall into drugs. We just hide it. I was so depressed after my divorce. I'm really sorry to hear that. And I'm glad to hear that you're a former addict. I hope that you have found your way forward and that you don't need to rely on a crutch like that anymore. And I hope that that divorce was for the best. Yeah. And I'll take one or two more. Miro says, Pascal's wager is getting really old at this point. About the commenter who said, Ali, who said, it doesn't bother him if he died and Islam isn't true. But thanks for reminding me of this. So, Ali and everyone listening, I've posed this example before. Imagine you show up at the gates of heaven and hell, and God is Jesus or someone else. And God tells you, you're going to hell. How would you feel in that moment? Like, you went through life, maybe even Islam helped you get through things, right? And your life was, fine. And then you arrive at the gates of heaven and hell, and God tells you, you chose to not look into my religion, you chose to not believe in me, then you're going to hell. Not only that, you're following a false prophet. You're following what I told you not to follow in the example of so and so and so. Like if that God tells you, in my religion, I explicitly said, don't follow a guy from the desert or don't follow a guy with these characteristics. Wouldn't you feel so betrayed and confused and cheated? Wouldn't you expect that God to know that you had good intentions and to know that you did do your best and it's not your fault that he can't send you a clear message? It's not your fault that he's jealous of other gods, or it's not your fault that he's not looking for just the intentions of being a good person, but also me. He wants recognition. He wants worship so badly. Wouldn't you feel extremely betrayed and confused that you did everything right? You even did Pascal's wager of, I'll just follow my religion just in case it's right, because if it's wrong, there's a lot to lose, and you still lose. It would be even worse than if you didn't follow a religion. You would still have the same questions. You would still ask, how come you weren't clearer? How come you care so much? How are you so obsessive about what people do towards you, or if they praise you or not? You still have these same questions, but at least you didn't sacrifice your whole life living a certain way only to be told that you did the complete opposite of what you should have. So every time someone brings up this Pascal's wager, the idea that I have nothing to lose anyway, think about how much more betrayed you would feel if you end up going to extra hell because you stuck to your ways and because God favored the other religion, not yours. That is a mental exercise that I've been trying to get people to do lately that's come to my mind during one of those live streams. And that's why I appreciate like call-in live streams very much, because I get to think about a lot of things that I hadn't before. That's what I appreciate a lot about this channel. I've grown so much because of the time that I spent thinking about what I'm going to write, the time that I spent talking to others, the times that I was challenged about something that I believe or proposed. So I'm very grateful and thankful to all of you for being part of that. And I promise I'll be around for as long as I can. So, up to however many subscribers we get to, doesn't matter, as long as I'm still doing the same thing, as long as, you're still here. And as long as, you can come and go, there's always going to be someone who needs this channel. So do not feel bad if you need to tune out of this stuff for a while. I know I do sometimes. Yeah. I'll get to a couple more comments because there are some interesting questions. Yo says, do you ever feel scared not knowing the unknown, the way that the universe could be? No, I don't, because I'm trying to think of an analogy. Without analogies, if I spend some time or energy or effort stressing and worrying about what could be in the afterlife, when I know for a fact that I've done my best to assess what the options are, I'm just going to lose the one life that I have. I mean, that's how I think about it. I wish I knew more about the universe, about everything, but I'll wait around while I try to figure it out, while other people try to figure it out, while we live and die and no one has figured it out. But what you're saying is more like it's not the fear of the unknown, I think, is what's scary. It's the fear of a particular brand of the unknown, the whole hellfire brand. It's not that we don't know what happens in the afterlife that's scary, as much as it's, but we don't know, but what if it's this horrifying thing? Neutrally, there's no reason for us to think there's going to be a horrible, torturous afterlife. This idea was introduced by religions. But if it's just about the unknown, about anything is possible, there's a lot more that's, or maybe just as much, I don't know about infinity, but there's at least an equal amount of awesome things that could happen as much as horrible things that could happen. So there's no point in stressing about it. If we're really thinking about the infinite possibility of things that could happen in the afterlife, if there is an afterlife, but only because we're zeroing in on the brand of horrible things might happen, that's what the scary part is. Thank you, Metalhead, for the super chat or super sticker. I appreciate it. Ali Ramzi says, you sound like you really care about people. You sound like you really care about why you choose to support the torture of super smart and empathetic animals like pigs. Why aren't you a vegan? That's a good point. So, yeah, that is, I wouldn't even call it a double standard per se. I'm aware that eating meat is supporting harmful ways that the meat was harvested, in a sense. The animals were grown up and raised and then killed. I know that that is harmful. I am doing my best to turn to veganism slowly because, and this may sound like me making up excuses, I am aware of that it is harmful, but I cannot suddenly switch to a plant-based diet because it involves not only cooking a lot more than I sometimes have the time for, it's more expensive to get the same amount of protein that I need. It's more expensive to make sure that there's no malnutrition there. And it takes more effort and time and energy, which I guess now I have more of, so I need to look into it more. So that's a good reminder. But it doesn't give me an excuse. Yeah, I should be more vegetarian or vegan than I am. I don't know if I can ever be completely vegan, but I will try to minimize the harm that I cause to animals. Yeah. And that may be a good point. At the moment, I can't afford the brands that claim to be free range and very good to the animals. I mean, the ones that I do support are supposedly also headed in that direction, but I don't trust any of them. But if I really wanted to go to like a local thing, I would have to spend a lot of money. And Ali says, if I wasn't a Muslim, I would try to be a vegan. Wait, how do those things conflict though? I know that in like during Eid and whatnot, you should slaughter an animal and eat it and all that. But do you have to, or can you choose to just be a vegan still? I think you can. I don't think you're forced to eat meat, but that is a good thing that you're thinking about that. So you should consider it, even though you're a Muslim. I don't think that should be a barrier. It might be at the very least weird. Okay, that's a good point. It's that in a sense, you're kind of telling God, I know better than what you're telling me to do. But a Muslim could also rationalize it and think, well, at the time, that was the best way to get nutrients out of, food, and they had to do what they had to do. But today, times have changed, and God doesn't say you have to eat meat. But it might feel to a lot like you're challenging God and saying, my standards are better than you. I will not harm animals, even though you told me that I'm allowed to. So it's not haram to partake in something halal, only it might make Eid al-Adha weird. It would cause a lot of weirdness, but yeah, that's an interesting question for some Muslims to ponder. Can you be vegan and Muslim? Is that challenging God's ethics, or is it just complementing God's ethics in the future? I mean, Islam prohibits super smart and empathetic animals like pigs and dogs. I don't know if it's because of them being smart and empathetic, because cows also are smart and empathetic. They're not as, like, how do you draw the line of what is too smart to be eaten? You know what I mean? I don't think it's fair to say that pigs are too smart to be eaten, but cows are not. So that is a question more for a vegan to ponder the ethics of that, or someone who argues that animals should not be killed because they have sentience or awareness. How much awareness do they have to be, or intelligence? Yeah, cows are very smart. So how come it's only pigs that people would think are very smart? Anyhow, oh yeah, last question I'll take from Yaqub. Do you still live by halal and haram? As an ex-Muslim, I imagine it would be it would not be easy to make a 180 on your previous way of life. Ultimately, I'm not an ex-Muslim, by the way. You don't have to do a 180, and that's the thing. I think that a lot of Muslims aren't even exactly on the straight path, so to speak. There's a lot of things that they allow themselves leeway in, because if you live by what's halal and not makruh only, it's going to be a very difficult life. Like, you can't interact with women in general unless they're, from behind min wara'i hijab or something, from behind a barrier. There's a lot of little details that seep into day-to-day life that a lot of Muslims kind of ignore. They say reasonably we don't have to follow it to the letter that way, things like that. But even further than that, there's a lot of more sinful things that Muslims do. So you'd be surprised how it's not that big of a transition. And it's not really like, leaving Islam is not about having the freedom to do the haram, not necessarily. Well, not for everyone. For someone, it might be having the freedom to take off her hijab, right? But for some, it might just be having the realization that Islam is not true, and then therefore all these other rules don't apply. But I still don't have to just go against the Islamic rule just because it's against the Islamic rule. You know what I mean? So you don't have to change your life that much. You'll just, for me, I just started adopting ideas that I found not harmful to me or others. So if it used to be haram, I don't care, as long as it's not harming me, yeah. Yeah, so I hope that answers that. Rehab says, all right, always from work. I am amidst of talking about religion and all. I think you are at work at the moment. Sorry about the bad timing of my streams every time. Anyway, thank you everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate you being here. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and look out for my upcoming videos. I really need to sit down and wrap up this video that I've been working on. So yeah, hopefully there's going to be a video about the hijab soon. Thanks for being here, everyone. Hopefully see you at the next milestone. And as always, think critically and think for yourself.